Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the What If guy, back with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Issei Inherits Ice Barrier Dragons. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. The Gremory clan, with the exception of Zenobia, along with Irina, Ravel, Serafal, Kuroka, and Luffy, abandoned Issei due to an old love of Rias, Jean. Since their reunion, Issei Hayato was considered unworthy by all of them for not being like Jean. His only allies were Sona Citri, her entourage, and the main woman of this story, Seekvaira Agars, regarded as the odd one out in the underworld since she was the only heiress without a following. Zenobia, in this scenario, was more thoughtful and unconditionally loved Issei. Rias and Surzex had a younger sister named Emilia Gremory, considered the disgrace of the clan for lacking the power of destruction. She only had support from her mother Venelana and Grafia, both divorced from Zeoticus and Surzex, respectively, and was also in love with Issei. Jean Hayato had a plan to gather the heiresses of the underworld into his harem, a situation that some factions agreed with. Various monsters from the history of Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Terminal and some archetypes outside of Duel Terminal would appear. The girls from the Gusto and Gishki archetypes were childhood friends of Issei. Old enemies from Duel Terminal would also make an appearance. Issei Hayato had sealed the spirit of Trishula, one of the three most powerful dragons from Duel Terminal, so powerful that it would terrify Ophis and Great Red. The story began with Issei, somewhat resigned, sitting in the park. He hoped Drake had arrived safely with her while gazing at the sky and recalling the boosted gear in his left hand. What had happened that Drake was not with Issei? In a flashback, after the defeat of Ryzelvim and Trihexa, everything seemed perfect for Issei and the Gremory clan until Jean, Rias's former boyfriend, arrived. Immediately, Rias and her entourage, with the exception of Zenobia, fell in love with him, forgetting about Issei. Jean was seen as a charming playboy, while Issei was labeled as the worst. Rias expressed her admiration for Jean, sitting on his lap, while Aquino playfully warned her not to monopolize him. Kuroka asked for strong kittens, and Kaneko insisted that Rias should not claim him. All the girls from the DXD group had switched their affections to Jean, except for one who remained loyal to Issei. Zenobia, furious, shouted at them, questioning how they could betray the one man who had done so much for them. Irina retorted, saying that Issei was merely a journey, while Jean was the destination. Rias dismissed Issei's importance, stating that he was her servant. In a fit of rage, Zenobia invoked Durandao, shattering a piece of furniture in the Hayato residence. Asia, nervous, pleaded with her to join Jean's harem, but Zenobia shouted back, expressing her desire to have harmed Asia when she arrived in Kuo. Rias, infuriated, ordered Zenobia to moderate her language and abandon Issei to join them. Zenobia declared that she no longer recognized Rias as her leader and renounced her position as her knight, teleporting away in a magical circle, leaving behind the harem of Jean. It was later revealed that Zenobia sought out Ajuka Beelzebub to have Rias's piece removed. She informed the Mao about the changes in the Gremory clan and the DXD girls, which enraged the green-haired Mao. To distance herself from Rias and the others, she went to the heavens to speak with Michael, sharing her concerns about her former companions, which upset the leader of the heavens and the seraphs. Despite everything, she kept in touch with Issei. Later, during a meeting of leaders, a delicate topic regarding Issei was discussed. Surzex stated that Issei Hayato had ceased to be useful to them. Serafal suggested that Jean, Rias's current boyfriend, could be a better Seikvaira and expressed her desire to join his harem. Penemu also mentioned her confusion over her attraction to Issei when Jean was such a gentleman. Azazel remarked that Rias had a better chance of becoming the new empress of the raiding games with Jean. However, there were those who opposed these decisions. Gabriel protested, alarmed at the idea of abandoning the hero who had helped them against the beast of the apocalypse. Michael indignantly questioned how they could replace the only man who saw Penemu as a woman and not as an object. Yasaka echoed the sentiment that they were ungrateful to Issei. Ajuka remained silent, harboring a desire to confront his colleagues, especially Serafal, for her self-serving motives. Sersex called for those in favor of removing Drake from Issei. The supporters included Sersex, Falbium, Serafal, Azazel, Shemhazai, Penemu, Odin, and Shiva. Those against included Michael, Zeus, Gabriel, Yasaka, and Ajuka. Sersex announced that it was official, Drake would be extracted from Issei's body the next day, smiling as he called for Rias. When she arrived, he instructed her to summon Issei for the extraction of his sacred gear and pawn pieces. Rias agreed and left, while Sersex concluded the meeting. Those in favor were visibly happy, and in the case of Serafal and Penemu, they were daydreaming about Jean in the Seekvaira armor, imagining him as a true knight. On the other hand, those against the decision were quite frustrated, like Michael and Zeus. Yasaka felt sad because she would have to explain to Kunu what was going to happen to Issei. Gabriel was in tears over the decision made in the meeting, but someone was going to save Issei from his predicament. Ajuka communicated with someone through a communication circle. He instructed that Issei Hayudo be brought to his palace immediately, emphasizing the need to protect him from an unfair deal imposed by the leaders. A woman's voice, filled with disdain for those leaders, assured Ajuka that she would prevent them from laying a finger on Issei. 2 hours later, in the palace of the green-haired Mao, Issei Hayudo appeared alongside a 15-year-old red-haired girl in a magic circle. Ajuka bowed respectfully to Emilia Gremory, who quickly expressed her disdain for her family name, preferring to be identified by her mother's surname, Bale. Ajuka acknowledged her request and turned to Issei, who appeared worried. Ajuka began to explain what had transpired in the meeting, detailing the decision to extract Drake along with the pawn pieces. This news deeply saddened Issei, but Emilia offered him emotional support during this difficult moment. Issei expressed his frustration over the situation, feeling overwhelmed by the changes happening to him. Emilia reassured him that he still had people who supported him, including Zenobia, Seekvaira, Ajuka, the Yukai who viewed him as a hero, and the Olympians who stood by him. She embraced him, and he returned the hug, feeling comforted by her presence. Drake, meanwhile, expressed his reluctance to serve someone he deemed unworthy. Ajuka then revealed that he had summoned Issei to ensure that he would not be harmed due to Rias Gremory and Sersex's whims. He offered to extract Issei's pawn pieces so that he could break free from the Gremory family. Issei was grateful for Ajuka's help but was concerned about Drake's fate. Ajuka reassured him that there was an alternative, but it would depend on Issei's acceptance. As Ajuka began the extraction process, it was a lengthy and painful ordeal for Issei, but they successfully removed the 8 pawn pieces. Drake then proposed a way for Issei to save himself, suggesting that he would need to renounce and pass on the boosted gear to someone worthy. Although it was a difficult choice, Issei felt the sincerity of his friend and agreed to the plan. As the ritual commenced, Issei followed Drake's instructions, placing his hand on the boosted gear and declaring his renunciation. The gear shattered into countless pieces, and a reddish sphere emerged from his arm. Drake instructed Issei to think of someone deserving of the power of the Seekvaira. Issei closed his eyes and thought of the one person who had always been by his side, a true warrior worthy of his trust. Drake acknowledged her potential as a partner. Issei expressed his gratitude, assuring Drake that he would be in good hands with her. As the sphere vanished in a flash of light, Ajuka reminded Issei and Emilia that they needed to leave without raising any suspicion about their presence. After the flashback, Issei sighed heavily, reflecting on the events of the past few days. Emilia joined him with 2 cans of iced tea, and they shared a laugh about how Rias and Sersex would react once they learned that Issei was no longer bound to Drake and had freed himself from the pawn pieces. As they left the park at sunset and turned a corner, Issei collided with someone. A green-haired girl, her hair secured with a golden clip, exclaimed in surprise. Another girl with her hair in a ponytail, held by a silver clip, scolded him for not paying attention. A third girl with orange streaks in her green hair recognized Issei and asked if he was Issei Hayudo. Confused but curious, Issei confirmed his identity. The girl pressed him about whether he remembered them, calling him a crybaby. Suddenly, Issei was flooded with memories of playing with 3 green-haired girls and a boy, along with a blue-haired girl and a white-haired boy. One of the green-haired girls had affectionately called him a crybaby when they were children, and as he looked at the girl before him, he realized it was Reese. Calm, the green-haired girl with a golden brooch, nodded. Winda, another green-haired girl with a silver brooch, smiled at Issei, who was grinning widely. They were all excited to see each other again. They were the same girls Issei had known from childhood, and he embraced them warmly, expressing how much he missed them. Emilia, feeling a twinge of jealousy, called out to Issei, wanting to know who his friends were. Issei introduced them as Reese Gusto, Calm Gusto, and Winda Gusto, his childhood friends, and then he introduced Emilia to them. It was a joyful reunion at the park in Kuro. Winda, noticing Issei's sadness, asked what was wrong. Issei and Emilia explained what had happened after the war against Trihexa, revealing that Issei was now shunned by his former harem and some leaders of the alliance, who were plotting against him. This news upset the Gusto sisters. Meanwhile, a white-furred Nikomata was watching Issei from a distance. She had informed her master of Issei's location. Soon after, Rias, along with her boyfriend and allies, arrived at the scene. Emilia and the Gusto sisters felt a wave of irritation upon seeing Rias' Gremory. Rias coldly demanded Issei hand over his boosted gear, claiming it belonged to Jean. Issei and Emilia exchanged serious glances, but then they both burst into laughter, much to Rias and her followers' offense. Issei declared that they were too late, as Drake had left his body and was now with someone he trusted completely. Aquino shouted in disbelief, insisting that no one could extract a sacred gear without dying. Emilia, angered, defended Issei, challenging Aquino and suggesting that her allies should search for Drake. Rias, furious, demanded respect for her entourage, but Emilia retorted that she had stopped considering Rias her sister the day Zeoticus divorced their mother. Rias, seething with anger, asked her Nikomata allies if they could find any traces of Drake. Kaneko and Kuroka began to search but reported that the sacred gear was not present. Rias demanded to know where Drake was, and Issei playfully suggested various potential new hosts, including Tobio Ikuse and Suzuha Himejima, which only fueled Rias's rage. In a fit of fury, Rias summoned a magical circle, ready to punish Issei. However, when her spell failed to take effect, Issei revealed that he had his evil pieces, which had been extracted by a friend. He smiled, feeling liberated from Rias's control. Rias, filled with wrath, threatened Issei with death and unleashed a sphere of destructive power. Just then, a gust of wind dissipated the sphere effortlessly, leaving Rias and her allies stunned. Winda, wielding a staff with an emerald prism, criticized Issei for being a servant to someone weak. Issei recalled a serious, time-manipulating girl he admired, who was trustworthy despite her strict demeanor. Winda's presence reminded him of her, and he smiled at her, causing her to blush while Calm and Reese looked on with jealousy. Reese declared it was time to confront Rias and her allies. She transformed into her combat attire, ready to fight alongside Issei. Calm joined in, asserting their friendship and support for Issei. Kaneko vowed to protect her leader, while Kuroka sharpened her claws, and Irina prepared to attack, though she felt her weapon was not responding as it should. The 3 traders charged forward, ready for battle. Reese emerged from the chaos, wielding her staff with a swift motion that summoned a tornado, sending the Nikomatas flying through the air. Kaneko, Kuroka, and Irina cried out as the fierce winds tossed them around, their distress evident. Rias, Aquino, and Lu Fei watched in horror as their friends struggled. Asia shouted for Kuroka, while Rosweiss called out for Irina, all of them feeling a deep sense of dread. Reese, seemingly unfazed, remarked on her boredom, striking the ground with her staff and causing the tornado to slam the Nikomatas down, creating a crater that left them incapacitated and their clothes in tatters. She noted that she hadn't even used her best wind techniques. In her mind, Rias recognized the potential of the Nikomatas and resolved to convince them to join her cause. She introduced herself formally, but Calm interrupted, expressing her disdain for Rias and her allies, refusing to betray Issei or Emilia. Calm's anger was palpable as she criticized Rias and her group, calling them traitors who failed to appreciate Issei's actions. Asia defended Rias, but Emilia retorted that respect must be earned. Aquino, with her usual sadistic flair, prepared to strike back, only to find her lightning neutralized. Calm explained that elemental magic could counter lightning, revealing her sisters had used wind against them. With determination, Calm prepared to attack, unleashing a sharp gust of wind that struck Aquino, sending her crashing into the trees. As Aquino fell unconscious, Rosweiss cried out, only to be caught off guard by Winda, who launched her own attack. Winda's wind-enhanced strikes battered Rosweiss, who felt her armor cracking under the pressure. With a final blow, Winda knocked Rosweiss out, leaving Rias in disbelief at the humiliating defeat of her allies. Meanwhile, Calm faced Lu Fei, trapping her in a whirlwind. Calm expressed her disappointment in Lu Fei's lineage, stating that she brought shame to the Pendragon name. As the whirlwind intensified, Lu Fei struggled, but Calm sent her crashing to the ground, leaving her injured. Ravel attempted to intervene with fireballs, but Calm effortlessly dispelled them. Calm taunted Ravel, creating compressed air bullets and launching them at her. The first struck Ravel in the abdomen, causing her to gasp, while the second hit her squarely in the face, leaving her dazed and bleeding. With Ravel down, only Jean, Asia, and Rias remained, all stunned by the power of Issei's friends, who appeared unscathed despite their overwhelming victory. Rias, trembling, asked who they were, while Asia shared her fear and Jean seemed paralyzed by terror. Rias declared their purpose, to protect Issei and Emilia. As Rias prepared to unleash another attack, Emilia began taking photos, laughing uncontrollably at the scene. Rias, Asia, and Jean suddenly realized they had lost control of their bladders, their jeans soaked and Jean's pants stained. Laughter erupted from Issei and the Gusto sisters, further fueling their anger and embarrassment. Rias vowed that this wouldn't end here, threatening to erase Issei's parents' memories with the help of Serafal and Penemu. Issei, alarmed, was reassured by Winda that his parents were safe with their allies. Rias expressed excitement about reuniting with them, and the scene shifted to the Hayudu residence, where Goru and Miki were reading a letter from Zenobia, distraught over the news of their son's peril. After saving them, they discarded his child as if it were a disposable battery. Goru expressed his frustration, hoping that Issei would arrive safely. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door of the Hayudo residence. The patriarchs approached cautiously and were pleasantly surprised by who they found. Miki Hayudo, with her red hair styled like a sea snail shell and a mischievous smile, greeted them warmly, accompanied by a shy girl with pale blue hair. Goru's friend, a muscular man standing at 1.95 meters, stepped forward, asking for a hug. Miki joyfully embraced her friend Noelia, exclaiming how long it had been since they last saw each other. Goru was equally excited to see Souza, who enveloped him in a bear hug that left him gasping for air. Apologizing, Souza released Goru, who was now gasping for breath, much to the amusement of Miki, Ariel, and Noelia. Noelia, noticing Miki's red eyes, expressed concern and inquired about Issei's whereabouts. Miki's mood darkened, prompting Goru to suggest they discuss matters inside, a proposal that Souza and Noelia agreed to. Inside, Miki and Goru recounted the supernatural events surrounding Issei, now the former Seekvaira, detailing his experiences with Rias Gremory and everything he had done for her and the underworld. They shared the story of the war against Trihexa and the impending betrayal from Rias and most of her entourage, who deemed Issei a useless pretty boy. They also mentioned a letter from Zenobia Corda, the only girl who had not betrayed him, officially referring to her as his fiancée, revealing her current situation and the decision to eliminate Issei to extract Drake and replace him with Jean. Noelia and Souza were unable to contain their anger at this revelation. Just then, two figures appeared in a magic circle, revealing Serafal Leviathan and Penemu, both wearing serious expressions. Miki confronted the intruders, accusing them of having ill intentions toward Issei. Serafal maliciously stated that they had come to erase their memories and modify them so that Asia Argento could have parents. Miki vehemently refused to be the mother of a deceitful nun, which infuriated Serafal. In a fit of rage, Serafal hurled a stalagmite at Mickey, but it halted just before impact, leaving her shocked. Ariel, cold and determined, stepped in, vowing not to let Mickey be harmed. With her staff activated, she prepared a powerful ice attack, declaring it a technique of the Gishki tribe. A barrage of ice needles rained down upon Serafal, who could not evade the assault. The onlookers watched as the Mao's body became a voodoo doll, the needles embedding themselves in her form. Serafal cried out in disbelief as the ice needles began to drain her strength. Penemu was horrified by the sight of a mere human girl overpowering one of the most powerful beings in the underworld. Noelia, with a wicked smile, warned Penemu to leave or face dire consequences. Penemu, refusing to back down, prepared to retaliate, but Souza intervened, brandishing 2 swords and delivering a swift cross-slash. Penemu screamed in pain as she began to bleed profusely, demanding to know who he was. Souza introduced himself as one of the leaders of the X-Saber tribe, vowing to protect his friends, especially Issei, and threatening Penemu with dire consequences if she harmed them. With great effort, Penemu staggered away, leaving Serafal, now immobilized and wounded, behind. After a tense 15 minutes, the door to the Hyudo residence opened to reveal Issei, Emilia, and the Gusto sisters. Mickey rushed to Issei, relieved to see him safe, having feared he had been harmed. Issei credited Reese, Winda, and Calm for their victory over the traitorous group, and he greeted Noelia and Souza warmly. Ariel, the blue-haired girl, shyly acknowledged Issei, who noted how much she had grown. Mickey recounted the encounter with Serafal and Penemu, explaining how Ariel had defended them and left Serafal in a vulnerable state. Emilia expressed surprise that a human girl could humiliate one of the most powerful beings in the underworld. As laughter filled the room, the Hyudo family, Souza, the Gusto sisters, and the Gishki shared a moment of camaraderie, reflecting on the night's events and the swift, intense confrontations that had unfolded. Meanwhile, in the underworld, Zenobia Quarta approached one of the hangars, preparing to meet her new master. Seekvaira Agars emerged, her strict demeanor evident as she questioned Zenovia's motives. The tension between them was palpable as Seekvaira expressed her disdain for the Gremory name and Zenovia's betrayal of Issei. The blue-haired girl knelt before the blonde, expressing her disconnection from the Gremory clan. She pleaded not to be compared to those who had betrayed her. Seekvaira questioned how she could trust her words. Just then, a voice interrupted, announcing the arrival of Zenovia, the successor of Issei Hyudo, who had come to formally join Seekvaira's group. Upon seeing the boosted gear on Zenovia's arm, Seekvaira couldn't help but shed tears, lamenting Issei's death. Drake reassured her that Issei was not dead and had passed the boosted gear to Zenovia. He emphasized that both Seekvaira and Zenovia shared a common bond, their love for Issei Hyudo. Moved by Drake's words and feeling a blush rise to her cheeks, Seekvaira invoked a magic circle, summoning a piece of a horse. She declared her command for Zenovia to reincarnate and bring glory to the Agars clan. The horse was absorbed into her body, and she welcomed Zenovia to the clan, inquiring about Issei's whereabouts. Drake admitted he did not know where Issei was but reassured them that he would grow stronger and eventually join their group, which brought smiles to Seekvaira and Zenovia. In the hospital, the emergency room was bustling as Rias, Asia, and Jean arrived with the traders, who needed medical attention after being severely beaten by the Gusto sisters. Rias had called her brother ahead of time, and he arrived with Kiba and Gasper shortly after. Surzex questioned what had happened to cause such a state among Rias's group, observing the intravenous lines being set up for Kuroka, Kaneko, and Irina. Rias, filled with fury, explained that it was Issei's doing, revealing that he had powerful allies. Surzex, incredulous, pointed out that they were supposed to be Issei's allies and loves. Rias expressed her frustration at not knowing about his childhood friends and lamented that they had been defeated by mere humans. Surzex was shocked by the news, and Rias revealed their plan to extract the sacred gear and hand it over to Jean. When asked if they succeeded, the traders shook their heads. Jean, angry, noted that Issei had transferred Drake through the boosted gear inheritance, thwarting their plans. Surzek struggled to comprehend the humiliation they faced, realizing that not only had Issei and his allies defeated them, but they also did not know who currently possessed the boosted gear. Suddenly, a nurse shouted that Serafal and Penemu were arriving in critical condition. Surzek witnessed a rare sight: Serafal, severely injured with ice shards embedded in her body, and Penemu, bleeding from her chest due to 2 cuts. Rias and Asia gasped in horror at the sight of their allies. Surzek demanded to know who had done this to Serafal, who struggled to speak, mentioning several allies of the Hyudo family. She revealed that Issei had likely anticipated their attack and called for help, expressing her humiliation as doctors removed the ice from her body. In a moment of anger, Surzek called for an urgent meeting with the leaders of the alliance, vowing that Issei Hyudo would pay for what he had done. Unbeknownst to them, Sona Citri had overheard everything and realized that Zenobia and Seekvaira were telling the truth about the plot against Issei. She quickly left using a magic circle. Meanwhile, at the Hyudo residence, Issei, the Gishki family, the Gusto girls, and one of the ex-Saber leaders discussed the recent events. Issei speculated that Surzek was learning about the attack from Rias and Serafal. Emilia expressed her annoyance, predicting that her brother would cause a scene in the underworld and among the alliance. Ariel, stoic, warned that the Hyudo family was in danger, as demons could attack treacherously. Goru noted that Surzek always became threatening when Rias was involved, suggesting an imminent attack due to the Gusto sisters' actions. Noelia mocked the idea of Serafal being a Mao, laughing at the weakness of demons. Mickey countered that while some demons might be weak, there were still loyal ones, like Ajuka, who had helped Issei sever ties with the Gremory clan, the Citri clan, and others, including their daughter-in-law, Zenobia Quarta. Suddenly, something snapped in the Gusto girls and Ariel, causing them to display dark auras. Reese smiled innocently while asking about Zenobia. Calm, unusually calm, inquired about her. Winda and Ariel cracked their knuckles with mischievous smiles, while Emilia, with a grin, remarked on saving Issei from her sister's schemes and discovering that Zenobia was now his official girlfriend. Issei felt a wave of terror wash over him as he looked at the chaos around him. Souza, visibly anxious, pointed out the gravity of the situation, mentioning that Mickey had just harmed her own child. The girls present shouted in frustration, and suddenly, a massive explosion rocked the room as Issei was struck by powerful spells of wind and fire, reminiscent of the intense battles seen in action anime. After the dust settled, Issei expressed his concern about their safety, suggesting that Surzek would likely convince many in the underworld and Grigori to come after them. Winder agreed, noting that even though they might be stronger, they would be outnumbered. Ariel added that they wouldn't be able to confront all of them at once. Meanwhile, at the ex-Saber tribe plateau, a serene silence accompanied by a gentle breeze swept across the lush green grass. Suddenly, bright white lightning illuminated the plains, and a portal appeared. From it emerged several figures. First, a couple with chestnut hair, followed by 3 with green hair, then an expressionless blue-haired girl, 2 red-haired individuals, and finally, a towering figure alongside Issei Hyudo. Souza welcomed them with a smile, introducing them to the world of Dual Terminal. The Hyudo couple marveled at the beauty surrounding them, with Issei commenting on the stunning landscapes framed by majestic mountains. Reese explained that this was just the beginning of their world's true beauty, pointing out a peaceful village where everyone, including children, carried weapons, symbolizing their readiness to defend their home. Noelia smiled at Reese, assuring her that they would soon share the truth about their world. Upon reaching the village entrance, they were met by 2 knights clad in dark blue armor, who demanded identification. Noelia confidently introduced herself as the leader of the Gishki tribe, followed by Ariel and Souza, who also revealed their identities. The knights exchanged glances before allowing them to pass, welcoming them to their home. In the underworld, a tense meeting of alliance leaders unfolded. Surzek was visibly furious, with Serafal and Penemu also showing signs of anger, their bodies bearing the marks of recent battles. The leaders supporting Issei maintained their composure, secretly amused by the situation. Surzek slammed a letter on the table, declaring it an insult. In a flashback, Surzex had teleported to the Hyudo residence, only to find it in ruins. Searching for traces of the Hyudo family, he discovered a letter left by Noelia, warning that any harm done to the Hyudo family or their allies would result in dire consequences. This message fueled Surzek's rage as he returned to the underworld to address the matter. He insisted on finding Issei Hyudo and his parents, determined to confront them for the injuries inflicted on his sister's entourage. Michael cautioned him against this course of action, reminding him that Issei's allies had defended him. Serafal argued that they needed to retrieve the boosted gear, but Ajuka challenged her motives, questioning whether it was for the alliance or merely personal vendetta. Penemu attempted to downplay Issei's significance, but Gabriel countered her arguments with sarcasm, highlighting Issei's accomplishments and the support he had garnered. Zeus interjected, stating that pursuing Issei would be a waste of time, as the Olympic faction would not participate in what he deemed a foolish endeavor. Yasaka echoed this sentiment, recalling how her daughter Konu had reacted fiercely upon learning of the threats against Issei. The tension in the room was palpable as the leaders grappled with their next steps, each weighing their loyalties and the implications of their actions. The Yukai faction would not participate in this matter. Valerie Teeps stated seriously that the vampires would not support it either. She emphasized that they would not turn their backs on the one who managed to resolve their differences between the Carmilla and Teeps clans. Almenahild glared at the leaders of the fallen angels, asserting that the heavens would not support this either. Michael, indifferent, declared that he would never be ungrateful to Issei, who risked his life for them without asking for anything in return. He found it despicable to consider Issei a criminal due to the whims of his sister and her entourage. Surzex and Azazel were astonished that the leaders of the alliance did not support the idea of labeling Issei a criminal. Odin sighed, acknowledging that searching for Issei worldwide was like looking for a needle in a haystack. He warned that if they wanted to search in their territory, they should be aware of the significant risks involved. Many cared for Issei, including his mother and ex-wife, who supported him fiercely. He cautioned that if Tannen and the dragons learned of their actions, they would come after them personally. Odin concluded by stating that the Asgardian faction would withdraw its support in recognizing Jean as the true Seekvaira and would not seek out Issei Hyudo, as he would not risk his people in a pointless war. The leaders of the demons, except for Ajuka Beelzebub, could not believe the alliance had turned its back on them. Michael announced that if there was nothing left to discuss, they would take their leave, leaving Surzex, Azazel, Penemu, and Serafal frustrated. Ajuka advised Surzex seriously, warning him that he was making hasty decisions to please his spoiled sister, which would ruin the alliance they had worked hard to build. He declared that he would not recognize Jean as the true Seekvaira before departing in a magical circle. Serafal expressed concern about Issei Hyudo's disappearance, noting that there was no trace of him or anyone wielding the sacred gear. Azazel proposed that they make Jean their own Issei Hyudo, with their own sacred gear, suggesting they expedite Jean's wedding with Serafal's sister's entourage. Surzex smiled wickedly, confident that they would have their Seekvaira after all. Everyone celebrated this plan, unaware that a small amphitheater was spying on the leaders' meeting, transmitting the information to its master, a Gothic lowly, alongside a colossal red dragon who looked disdainfully at Surzex and his accomplices. Ophis was furious, expressing her anger at Red for laughing. She questioned why he found it amusing when Issei was in danger with those demons. Red explained that it wasn't about that. It was about the dual-terminal world, the world before Elohim, and how they did not know who they were dealing with. Ophis, curious, asked if Red knew about that faction. Red revealed that when that faction existed, Ophis was just a newly hatched larva, and he was a very young dragon. He described them as great warriors and powerful sorcerers who inhabited dangerous beasts on par with dragon kings or stronger. He noted that Mao Serafal had been easily defeated by a human, and 3 dragons lived there who could surpass both of them without difficulty. Ophis was taken aback, hoping it was a joke. Red assured her he never lied and recounted the brutal power of those 3 dragons, Bryanak, Gungnir, and especially Trishula, the dragons of the ice barrier. He explained that one of them could destroy the entire planet without mercy, and together they could annihilate it. Red shared that they inspired him to become stronger after the last tragic event that led to their extinction. Ophis, intrigued, asked Red to tell her the story of the dual terminal, especially about the power of those dragons. In the world of the dual terminal, after walking through the village of the Hyudo allies, they arrived at a castle where the other leaders awaited to meet their friends. A man with dark skin and a monstrous physique, bare-chested with a snowflake detail on his back, welcomed Souza and Noelia back. The Hyudo family, along with Emilia Bale, arrived at a spacious house large enough to accommodate their friend's family and 6 or 7 guests. The 3-story house had a simple Baroque style. The 3rd floor contained the bedrooms for the dual terminal family and 3 guest rooms. The 2nd floor housed a study filled with documents, books, and writings from their world. Finally, the ground floor featured a dining room with maplewood furniture and a main hall with 3 sofas and a fireplace, where all the protagonists gathered, their faces serious as the fire illuminated them. Noelia addressed her friends, stating that they needed to be honest. She revealed that they were a civilization that existed long before the biblical God, surprising them with the revelation that they had lived for over 3 millennia. Emilia, incredulous, asked if they were older than Great Red and Ophis. Souza confirmed that they had seen Ophis when she was born, recalling her as a very young dragon. He then indicated it was time for them to learn about their origins, prompting Noelia to place her staff in the center for everyone to witness the history of the dual terminal and see the world before Elohim. After witnessing the origins of everything and how it ended in extinction, Goru and Miki Hiwodo were shocked by how many tribes and civilizations perished in a brutal battle. Initially, the conflict was about one tribe wanting to dominate another, but in the end, they had to unite against a powerful goddess and a lethal cybernetic creation, the ultimate weapon. This struggle cost the lives of the last warriors who fought against the final threat. Issei and Emilia were seen crying unconsciously at what they had witnessed. Reese expressed her concern, wondering what was wrong with them. Emilia wiped her tears and questioned why everything felt so nostalgic. Issei echoed her feelings, also shedding tears and wondering about the source of his nostalgia. This left the beings of the dual terminal perplexed. Miki, intrigued, asked how they were still alive. Noelia explained that when all the extinct civilizations wandered in limbo, including herself and the Gishki, Souza and the X-Saber, as well as the girls and the Gusto, they spoke and each expressed their apologies and regrets for the actions of their respective tribes. It was then that Elohim, sensing their true remorse, offered them a new opportunity to live. He created another dimension where they could exist in harmony and peace, a proposal they all accepted, allowing them to live eternally thanks to Elohim. Reese then mentioned that some souls did not reach limbo, including members of the Necros tribe, Emilia Gishki, Avance Gishki, Shurit, and Exa, as well as members of the ritual beast tamer, including her late husband Kamui and her daughter Pilika. As she wept for her family who did not return, Winda comforted her. At that moment, emotions ran high as they reflected on the painful history of war, the extinction of their tribes, and the sacrifices of their loved ones. They had learned the harsh consequences of the war that led to the world's end before Elohim. Meanwhile, in the underworld, at Surzek's palace, a party of high-ranking demons was taking place. Various patriarchs were engaged in lively conversations, and the Gremory family was seen chatting animatedly with Irina, Kuroka, Lefay, Serafal, and Penemu, some behaving like divas. However, in a corner, a group watched them with disdain. Seekvaira expressed her disgust at how they acted as if nothing had happened. Sona shared her sentiments, glaring at her former friend Gremory. Her entourage had also severed ties with the Gremory family, except for Zenobia, who considered Issei her greatest friend and Saji his friendly rival. Valle, accompanied by Lavinia Remy, Gabriel, Kunu, Razor, and his entourage, approached and asked if anyone knew where Hyudo Issei was. Seekvaira questioned if he was unaware of what had happened, to which Valle shook his head. Sona then explained the plans the Maus had, particularly Surzex and Serafal, along with Azazel and Penemu, to kill Issei and extract his sacred gear to give it to Rias's new fiancé. She also mentioned how Issei had inherited the sacred gear to an ally and how they had easily humiliated Rias's entourage, as well as how Serafal and Penemu had attempted to harm Issei's parents but ended up severely injured. The group of Issei's allies and friends grew angry at Rias and her companions for their actions, but the arrival of another group only fueled their anger further. Rias greeted Seekvaira cheerfully, but Seekvaira responded with clear disdain. Asia, indignant, questioned why Seekvaira spoke to Rias that way, while Sona added her own scathing remark, shocking the Gremory entourage since Sona rarely insulted anyone unless she truly despised them. Rias demanded more respect for her entourage, but Seekvaira retorted that respect must be earned, not given. A magical circle appeared, revealing Zenobia dressed in her exorcist attire, standing beside Seekvaira. Rias angrily questioned Zenovia's whereabouts and commanded her never to defy her again. Zenobia, with disdain, revealed an evil piece from Rias, stating she had stopped seeing Rias as her master when she chose Jean over Issei, declaring herself a loyal knight of Seekvaira. Rias confidently asserted that Issei was easy to manipulate and without Drake, he was nothing more than a joke. She was sure that once they located the bearer of Drake, he would return to them, insisting that the dragon should never abandon the Gremory family. Seekvaira sarcastically agreed but reminded Rias that her entourage was nothing without Issei, who had been fundamental to their victories. Rias attempted to argue, but Vala interrupted, expressing his satisfaction that humans had put Rias and her group in their place, mocking them for their reality. Rias and her followers were still reeling from their humiliating defeat at the hands of mere humans. Rias, filled with arrogance, dismissed their victory as mere luck, while Sona mocked her, suggesting that if luck had not been on their side, they would have been buried deep underground. Ubaluna chimed in, noting that despite Issei no longer having Drake, he was still striving to become stronger, not for himself, but to protect his loved ones. This remark about the Phoenix Queen drew nods of agreement from others but sparked irritation among Rias and her group. Rias's frustration boiled over, but before she could voice her anger, a glass was tapped, drawing everyone's attention to Surzex and Azazel. Rias and her followers smiled, and Rias declared it was time to leave the losers, who still admired the foolish Issei. They ascended to the platform where the Mao and the cadre awaited. Surzex addressed the crowd, announcing that in a year, the rating games would commence, with the inaugural match featuring Rias Gremory's team against Seekvaira Agarz's team. The crowd erupted in applause, and jests were directed at Seekvaira, who remained unfazed by the taunts. Then, Surzex introduced a familiar figure, Issei, who stood proudly with the boosted gear. The crowd cheered for him, some children calling out for the Issei dragon. Issei greeted everyone and announced his upcoming wedding to his beautiful fiancée, Rias Gremory, stating that they would marry immediately after defeating Seekvaira. Rias beamed with happiness, while the allies of Issei stood in shock. Seekvaira, tears streaming down her face, lamented that he had promised to be with her. Other women, including Venelana, Grafia, Elmenahild, Valerie, and Gabriel, also cried at Issei's words, but one remained resolute, glaring at Issei with disdain. Zenobia. She expressed her disbelief, questioning how this Issei could possess the boosted gear when her current bearer was still alive. A green light emanated from Zenovia's arm, revealing Drake, who had been hiding to avoid detection. He expressed his disdain for Surzex, who had replaced him with a lesser dragon. Vitra confirmed that Issei was a doppelganger, and Vala recalled Azazel's artificial sacred gear containing the spirit of that dishonorable dragon. Sona confirmed that Issei had left to train and promised to return. Seekvaira mentioned that he had promised to become her pawn, while Zenobia claimed he would propose to her as well. However, the intense glares from her friends made her reconsider, leading her to suggest that she would convince him to marry them all. Grafia suggested they leave, finding the gathering distasteful. Venelana agreed, sharing a kiss with Grafia that left everyone stunned. As they prepared to depart, Biko questioned their relationship, to which Venelana responded that they were indeed a couple, but only for one man, Issei. As they exited, Sona encountered Serafal, who complained about not being included in the meeting, expressing her desire to announce her engagement to Issei. Sona, with a sharp gaze, confronted her sister about her sudden change of heart toward Issei, recalling how Serafal had professed hatred for him while being involved with Jean. Serafal grew anxious under Sona's scrutiny, but Sona's fury erupted as she declared her identity as Sona Citri, Mal Leviathan, and accused Serafal and the others of trying to impose lies upon them. She shouted that they knew the Issei present was not the real one and that they had intended to harm him. With tears in her eyes, Sona's voice rose in anger as she proclaimed that they had wanted to kill their true Issei, the hero to whom they owed their lives. Serafal Leviathan found herself at a loss for words after hearing Sona's declaration. Tears began to flow as the person she loved most shouted at her, condemning everything she had done. Sona expressed that once the charade ended and the real Issei returned, she and the women accompanying her would be his true wives, while Sona's world of fantasy and lies would crumble, leaving no escape for them. Sona glared at her sister with disdain. Upon hearing this, Serafal's anger flared. She declared that she would not allow a pervert to take away Sona's innocence. Confidently, Serafal proposed a challenge. If Seekvaira defeated Rias Gremory, Sona would be free to marry him. However, if Rias won, Sona would marry their Issei. It was hard to believe that Serafal, who had fought to keep her sister from being committed to someone, now wanted to bind her to someone they all despised, especially Sona, who personally wished to confront Jean for the harm done to Issei. Seekvaira shouted back, demanding respect for Rias Gremory, infuriated by Serafal's words. She emphasized that thanks to Rias, she had a true man by her side. Venelana chimed in, holding Graphia's hand, asserting that they would have a true dragon and criticized Serafal's choice of a man who needed wealth, power, and beautiful women to feel satisfied. Venelana expressed her disappointment in the actions taken during a meeting that brought an impostor into their lives, declaring that the only daughter she recognized was Emilia. Graphia pointed out that unlike Issei, the real Issei did not ask for anything in return. He was content just to see them happy, which spoke volumes about his character. Serafal's fury reached new heights. Sona decided it was time to leave, creating a large circle around her allies. She warned Serafal not to visit her again before disappearing into the circle, leaving a furious Serafal behind. In the dual terminal world at the home of Noelia and Souza initiated an important discussion. He advised everyone to train for their own good, looking at the parents and Issei with Emilia. Goru expressed doubt about their ability to keep up with the training, while Miki Hyudo admitted they could barely jog for half an hour. Noelia returned with a glass jar containing a golden liquid, declaring it a rejuvenation potion, difficult for an ordinary mortal to create but easy for her. She poured the potion into 2 cups and handed them to Issei's parents, who exchanged smiles before drinking every last drop. Everyone in the house watched the Hyudo family with curiosity. Issei, concerned, asked Noelia what would happen if they consumed a poorly prepared potion. The next morning, Issei and Emilia were the first to wake up. They decided to head to the mountains of the dual terminal world without informing the Hyudo family or their allies. Issei inquired if the card was ready, to which Emilia confirmed, placing it on Noelia's oak table. She suggested they leave soon, and Issei nodded in agreement. The two quietly exited Noelia and Souza's home and made their way toward the mountains, drawn by a powerful force. As they walked through the rustic village, they noticed various shops opening for business, and both Issei and Emilia felt a sense of peace. Issei remarked on the tranquility of the place, saying it made all his problems seem to vanish. Emilia agreed, expressing her desire to convince her mother and Graphia to live there, far from the Gremory family. Issei mentioned wanting to persuade Seekchan and Zenobia as well, but then his expression shifted from calm to one of pain and desperation. Emilia noticed Issei's change and asked what was wrong. He simply pointed, and she followed his gaze to see a black-haired girl in a cream-colored dress and black apron, happily carrying vegetables in wooden crates. Issei's heart raced as he recognized her Rainier, the fallen angel who had caused him immense emotional pain. Rainier was equally shocked to see Issei, her surprise quickly turning to tears. Emilia sensed the tension between them, aware of Rainier's past attempts on Issei's life and the fact that her sister had reincarnated him. A woman with a refined and playful demeanor approached Rainier, expressing surprise at her connection to the newcomers. Rainier, still taken aback, wiped her tears as the woman encouraged her to take the day off, assuring her it wouldn't affect her pay. Rainier, feeling embarrassed, agreed. Once alone with Issei and Emilia, Rainier invited them to her home, acknowledging that she owed them an explanation. The two nodded and followed her for a brief conversation. Meanwhile, in the underworld at the Gremory Castle, Rias and her followers were visibly upset, having just experienced a setback. Earlier, they had gone to deliver wedding invitations to Venelana and Grafia, but Grafia had frozen and destroyed them, refusing to attend the wedding. Venelana looked at her daughter and the former nun with disdain, questioning their belief that the man they intended to marry was truly Issei. Rias expressed her pain, urging for support during such a significant moment. However, Grafia, overwhelmed with anger, struck Rias, leaving her on the ground. Grafia declared that they all knew Jean was involved. Asia tried to convince Grafia, stating that they wanted her to attend their wedding because Jean was her daughter. But Grafia, still furious, lashed out, and Venelana joined in, slapping Asia and bringing tears to her eyes. Venelana expressed her disdain, claiming that Rias had ceased to be her daughter the moment she chose Issei, who had sacrificed so much for her, over a man she deemed incompetent. Venelana declared that she only considered Emilia as her true daughter, which infuriated and saddened Rias. Rias vehemently defended Issei, insisting that everything he did was his duty as her servant. She also condemned Emilia, calling her a disgrace to the Gremory clan. Grafia, filled with rage, proclaimed that Jean could never replace a great hero like Issei. She acknowledged Emilia's worth as a woman with a big heart who loved Issei unconditionally, despite her lack of power. Rias was taken aback by the betrayal from her mother and ex-sister-in-law. Venelana coldly revealed that they had remained silent about the truth of Issei being an impostor, waiting for the moment when the real Issei would return, and it would be too late for Rias and her allies. Rias paled, realizing they still had no information on Issei or the new boosted gear wielder, both crucial matters she had yet to resolve. Venelana turned her back on Rias, dismissing her, which left Rias and Asia with heavy hearts as they departed. A similar fate awaited the others. Aquino attempted to invite her family, but Barakil and Suzuka destroyed the invitations, and she received a slap from her cousin for trying to protect Issei. Kaneko and Kuroka went to Kyoto to deliver invitations to Yasaka and Kunu, but the Kitsunes forced them to leave, declaring the territory loyal to Issei Hyudo, making anyone associated with Jean unwelcome. Rosweiss had an even worse experience. When she went to deliver her wedding invitation to Gondel, the door was slammed in her face without a word. Valkyries mocked her, questioning her decision to abandon Issei, which led to Rosweiss confronting them, only to be overpowered and return to the underworld with injuries. Irina traveled to heaven to deliver her invitations to Michael and Gabriel, but the strongest seraph took the invitations and shredded them, telling her to leave as they were too busy. This left Irina feeling dejected. She then approached her father, who also declined to attend the wedding, citing church matters in England. Ravel faced her own struggles when she visited her family. Her parents reluctantly accepted the invitations, but Razor and Ruvel incinerated them, threatening her if she didn't leave the castle. Serafal tried to invite her parents but was ignored, which saddened her. She then attempted to invite Sona, resulting in a conversation that left her emotionally devastated. Lu Fei sought to invite her brother, Biko, Lavinia, and Valet, but received nothing but disdain from her former team. As the flashback ended, Aquino cried, recalling her father's disappointed and angry expression. Ravel expressed her frustration, feeling that Issei had won over her family. Kaneko noted that Kyoto no longer accepted them since their engagement to Jean. Rosweiss lamented the humiliation she faced from her former colleagues. Rias, filled with rage, expressed her desire to find Issei and Emilia, vowing to take revenge. Lu Fei shared her distress over the lack of leads on Hyudo's whereabouts. Rias, feeling defeated, lamented the absence of any trace of Issei or her sister, as if the earth had swallowed them whole. Kuroka voiced her unease, insisting they needed to find and eliminate Issei before their plans fell apart. Rias resolved to restart their search, declaring they had a year to locate him. The followers of Rias agreed, determined as they teleported in a magical circle, setting off on their mission to find Issei and confront him. Meanwhile, in the dual terminal world, Issei and Emilia sat in a room with the former assassin, who wore a sorrowful expression, while Issei and Emilia maintained a serious demeanor. Rainier took a sip of her cinnamon apple tea and explained her actions to Issei. He nodded as she continued, sharing her past as a loyal angel to Azazel. However, due to a trick by Donasik, she fell under a mind control spell. Rainier expressed her deep regret for the atrocities she committed in Kokobil's name, including the attempt on Issei's life and that of Asia Argento. It was only when Rias Gremory nearly killed her that she broke free from the spell and sought Issei's help. Issei, still incredulous, processed her words. Rainier confirmed that her pleas for help were genuine, but the inevitable happened. Rias had killed her. When she awoke, she found herself in a new world, welcomed by Morningstar, the leader of the Dark Lords and one of the heads of the dual terminal. He heard her prayers and offered her a chance to join his army, which she accepted, grateful for the opportunity to live peacefully in this new world. She turned to Issei, asking for forgiveness for the pain she had caused him. Tears filled her eyes as she expressed her remorse, admitting that she had longed to apologize since her arrival. Issei and Emilia saw the sincerity in Rainier's eyes and exchanged glances before agreeing to move forward. Issei reassured her that what happened was in the past and offered his heartfelt forgiveness. Overwhelmed with emotion, Rainier embraced him, tears of joy streaming down her face as she thanked him profusely. Emilia, feeling a surge of jealousy, pulled Rainier away from Issei, warning her to keep her distance. Issei then coldly stated that Rias Gremory was no longer his master, having lost all respect for her as a leader of the fallen angels. Rainier was taken aback by Issei's words and asked for an explanation. He recounted the events following his death at Rias's hands, revealing the betrayal of her followers, including Surzex, Serafal, Penemu, and Azazel. They had chosen to replace him with an old childhood love of Rias, culminating in a plot to kill him to extract his sacred gear for Jean. This revelation angered Rainier, especially towards Azazel, whom she had admired. After thanking Rainier for the tea, Issei stood up, stating they needed to head to the mountains to train. Rainier pointed out that the mountains only contained a monument to extinct tribes and that the environment was quite hostile. However, Emilia felt a familiar pull toward a certain power, urging them to seek it out. Rainier, surprised by Emilia's words, decided to join them, insisting she knew the way to the monument. She warned them that the path was treacherous and that anyone unfamiliar with it could easily get lost. They agreed to leave in 10 minutes. After a long trek through the rugged terrain, Issei, Emilia, and Rainier reached the base of the icy mountains. The path had become treacherous, covered in ice and snow, and a storm had begun to brew. Thanks to Rainier's guidance and the oil lamps they carried, they managed to avoid falling into an abyss. After 2 hours of climbing icy walls, they finally arrived at a block of marble shaped like an incomplete pyramid. Rainier announced that they had found the monument to the extinct tribes. As Issei and Emilia approached, they felt the power emanating from the marble. They traced their fingers over the cold surface and discovered an inscription that caught their attention. Necros. Suddenly, both Issei and Emilia were flooded with memories from their last battle against the Infernoid Tierra, causing them to recoil in shock. Rainier, alarmed, rushed to them, asking if they were okay. They explained that the name had triggered memories of the last war, leaving them confused about their purpose in this world. Issei, feeling a deep sense of unease, questioned his identity. Just then, a voice echoed from the monument, promising to reveal the answers they sought. The marble block began to open, and both Issei and Emilia felt a connection to the power within. Emilia urged Issei to enter, and he agreed, stepping toward the monolith. However, when Rainier attempted to follow, a force repelled her. A voice warned her that she would not be allowed entry but could inform their loved ones in the village that they would not return for a long time. As the entrance closed, Rainier felt a wave of worry wash over her until a familiar figure appeared beside her. A red-haired boy, dressed in green resembling a bird, reassured her that they would be fine. Rainier recognized him and felt a sense of hope amidst her concern. Rainier remarked that he was the son of the Mao Surzex, to which the red-haired boy shouted in anger that Surzex was not his father. He had stopped seeing Zeoticus Gremory as his grandfather and especially Rius Gremory as his aunt. Ever since Surzex Gremory had sent him on that dangerous mission to prevent him from interfering with the sinister plan against Issei and Emilia, he had been filled with fury and tears as he recalled that dark moment in his life. Rainier questioned if he was truly who she thought he was. He introduced himself as Milica's Lucifuge, or Milica's, the bearer of the Necros of Clausulus, the lost son of Graphia. In the marble monolith, Issei and Emilia advanced through an underground corridor. As they walked, torches magically lit their path. After a long journey, they entered a room illuminated by the glow of 4 weapons embedded in a block of steel and chained: a sword, a staff, a spear, and combat claws. Suddenly, the sword began to shine, and a powerful voice resonated, welcoming Issei and Emilia. Issei, feeling the immense power radiating from the glowing weapons, asked who they were. The staff then glowed, and a feminine voice introduced herself as Gungnir, the dragon of the ice barrier, stating that her spirit resided in the staff. Another voice identified itself as Bryanek, the dragon of the ice barrier, revealing that it also resided in the sword, but it was not alone. Then, a third voice introduced itself as Trishula, the most powerful of the 3 dragons, and explained that they had summoned Issei and Emilia for 2 reasons: to train them and, more importantly, to reveal the truth about their past lives. Issei and Emilia were astonished, realizing that this encounter was truly predestined. In a preview of what was to come, Issei urged Seekvaira to give in and join his harem, while Asia encouraged Seekvaira to feel proud of becoming part of their man's harem. Seekvaira, furious, rejected the idea and pushed Issei away. A red-haired boy with a white streak and heterochromia then confronted them, furious at the sight of the green-haired sisters who had humiliated his harem. The boy introduced himself as Shurit, also known as Hayudo Issei, a pawn of Seekvaira. Surzex, impressed, called out to Milikas, who responded with disdain, telling Surzex not to speak to him so closely. Meanwhile, a critically injured Rius pleaded for mercy from Emilia, who smiled wickedly after using Gishki magic to transform, declaring herself Evigishki Gustkraken. In the marble monolith's interior, Issei and Emilia were left in shock at the mention of their past lives. Trishula confirmed that their mere presence had awakened the spirits from a millennia-long slumber, but only the sword and the staff had been activated, while the spear and combat claws remained dormant. Emilia inquired if there were spirits within the inactive weapons, and Bryanek confirmed that they could only awaken when their original owners or their reincarnations were present. Determined, Issei and Emilia grasped their respective weapons, and upon contact, they were transported to an empty space. Confused, they wondered where they were, and a voice explained that they were inside their weapons. As snow began to fall, they sensed 3 powerful presences behind them, which dwarfed even the Trihexa and Great Red, leaving them terrified. Bryanek, Gungnir, and Trishula assured them that they meant no harm and had brought them there to clarify their doubts. The quadrupedal dragon emphasized the necessity of remembering who they were, while the 3-headed dragon approached menacingly, stating it was time for Shurit and Emilia Gishki to awaken. As the dragon's eyes began to glow, an aura enveloped Issei and Emilia. They felt a strange sensation as luminous silhouettes detached from them, revealing 2 figures they had seen when Noelia showed them the origins of the dual terminal. Issei, incredulous, recognized Shurit, while Emilia Gishki was astonished to see a heroine from the dual terminal who looked exactly like her. Shurit greeted Issei Hayudo, introducing herself as his reincarnation, while the heroine of the Necros tribe, Emilia, smiled at the Bale girl, expressing her desire to speak with her. Issei and Emilia were at a loss for words as Bryanek remarked on how long it had been since they last saw them, and Gungnir acknowledged their souls had remained in the old world. Trishula expressed surprise at how long it took for Shurit to reincarnate, especially in a boy who only liked BRSS, causing laughter among the 2 Emilias and the 3 dragons. It had ended in a terrible betrayal by the woman he once loved. At this comment, the 3 dragons began to grow angry. Emilia Gishki, indignant, expressed that her own reincarnation had not led a happy life either. Without that disgusting demonic power, she had been despised and cast aside by those she once called father, brother, and sister. The only unconditional support she received was from her mother and her former sister-in-law. Curiously, her sister was the same person who had betrayed the reincarnation of her son, Shurit. Emilia's words provoked a roar of anger from the three dragons. Bryanak shouted in fury that it was unacceptable. Gungnir echoed the sentiment, declaring that they must perish. Trishula roared thunderously, feeling the suffering of Issei and Emilia. Shurit explained that now that they knew they were their reincarnations, a spiritual rule dictated that upon such revelation, they would merge with their souls and, unfortunately, disappear. Issei, confused and somewhat anxious, expressed that he still had many questions for Shurit. Shurit reassured him that he would have his answers sooner or later. Emilia Bale then asked if this meant that Emilia Gishki would also disappear, as she too had many questions. Emilia Gishki embraced the girl Bale, telling her not to worry. As Shurit had said, she would have her answers eventually. When their souls merged, they would inherit their powers and abilities. Shurit felt it was time for goodbyes and began to glow once more. He asked Trishula and Bryanak to train Issei well. The dragons agreed as they watched Shurit's soul merge with Issei. In that moment, Issei underwent a slight transformation. His hair retained its shape but changed from brown to scarlet, with a white streak appearing. The heterochromia of Shurit manifested in Issei's eyes. Emilia Gishki also began to glow as she prepared to merge with Emilia Bale. She assured her that she never needed the power of her family because she would receive a greater power from both the Nikras and the Gishki tribe, along with the support of her friend, Gungnir. Gungnir, with a hint of sorrow in her voice, promised to take good care of Emilia as she watched Emilia Gishki merge with Emilia Bale. In this transformation, the girl Bale only grew slightly taller, and her hair lengthened a bit more. Emilia felt a surge of strength and magic within her. Issei echoed her sentiment, feeling significantly stronger than he had with the boosted gear. They both vowed not to disappoint Shurit and Emilia. Gungnir expressed her approval of their attitudes and explained that they would be transported to a new dimension where time would flow differently. 1 year of training would equate to 1 month in the dual terminal world. Bryanak stated that they would train them for 12 years to ensure their bodies and magical reserves could withstand their respective powers. Trishula asked if they were ready. Emilia and Issei exchanged smiles and looked at the three dragons, enthusiastically affirming their readiness. Trishula declared that the training would begin. In the dual terminal world, at the home of Noelia and Souza, Issei and Emilia were training within the monolith. Meanwhile, Noelia and Souza had read the letter left by the now former brown-haired boy and the red-haired Bale. The letter informed them that they were seeking a power that felt quite familiar in the mountains of the dual terminal. This news worried the Gusto girls, Ariel, and Issei's rejuvenated parents. As they prepared to search for Issei and Emilia in the mountains, they knew the dangers that lay ahead, especially since only the Hayudo family was aware of the risks involved. They intended to honor the tribes that never reached the limbo after the last battle. Just then, Rainier and Milikas arrived to inform them of what had transpired with Issei and Emilia. The Hayudo family was overjoyed to see Milikas again, having believed he had disappeared on a mission, unaware it was a plan by his father to rid himself of Milikas to extract the sacred gear from Issei. Rainier explained how Issei and Emilia had entered the monolith, leaving Souza and Noelia astonished. Smile formed on Souza's face as he remarked that the dragons of the ice barrier would return to action. Noelia, smiling, thought to herself that her daughter had returned, as Emilia Bale turned out to be the reincarnation of her daughter, Emilia Gishki. Souza then asked Goru and Mickey if they were ready for their training, promising to push them hard, along with the leaders of his X-Saber tribe. The young parents of Issei shouted their readiness. Noelia addressed the green-haired girls and Ariel, stating they too must train to be worthy of Issei and not let Emilia gain an advantage. The most important reason was to save the heir of Agars and the new Seekvaira, as well as their harem sisters. They all affirmed their commitment to the cause. Rainier expressed her desire to help, feeling she owed it to Issei for the noble cause he had taken on. Milikas also vowed to prove to his father that he had made a mistake by sending him on a suicidal mission to fulfill the whims of her, referring to Rias Gremory with disdain. Souza shouted that they should not waste any time and that it was time to train. Everyone in the residence enthusiastically agreed. 1 year later, within the marble monolith, the dragons subjected Issei to intense physical training and endurance sessions, while Gungnir put Emilia through exhausting magical training. In the first 2 months, which equated to 2 years in the dimension, Issei marked his muscular development and acquired new physical abilities, including a 200% increase in strength in hand-to-hand combat, thanks to his training with Bryanek. With his newfound strength, he could easily destroy metals and precious stones like gold, silver, platinum, and jade, and even crack pure diamonds. In the following 2 months, Trishula trained him in magic to ensure he would be a suitable vessel for the powers of both the three-headed dragon and Bryanek. He learned to create new draconic magic, including ice and water attacks and defensive spells. With this training, he knew he could surpass Serafal and Graphia without any trouble. The next 8 months proved to be the ultimate test, mastering the 2 Necros of the 2 dragons. The first challenge was mastering Bryanek. Initially, it was difficult for Issei because, unlike the balance breaker he had with Drake, he felt an overwhelming power when he summoned the Necros of the youngest dragon among the 3. However, he gradually mastered the Necros of Bryanek, and with its power he could freeze a city effortlessly. But the true test lay in mastering the Necros of Trishula. At first, it was highly unstable. The power was so immense that Issei often found himself injured. Thanks to Bryanek and Gungnir, along with Emilia's assistance, he managed to recover. He faced numerous failures in mastering this Necros, but his spirit and determination to save Drake, Seekvaira, and Zenobia from Surzex and Rias were crucial in his success. With his power, he could easily match Great Red and could destroy an entire city the size of New York in under 10 seconds. With Emilia's training, he honed his magical reserves and, with guidance from Gungnir and occasionally Bryanek, he mastered the ancient Gishki magic, allowing him to control 2 transformations without losing control, thanks to the dragoness who provided him with the mirror for transformation. Another challenge was mastering the Necros of Gungnir. Just like with Trishula, it was initially unstable, and he often injured himself during attempts. However, his willpower was the key to mastering this Necros as well. Both reincarnations of Shurit and Emilia Gishki surpassed the basic training of the Ice Barrier Dragons. Souza took Issei's parents to the X-Saber tribe, where they met its members. They underwent intense physical training sessions for 2 months, gradually acquiring strength, speed, endurance, and defense while engaging in hand-to-hand combat against Souza and the leader of the X-Sabers, X-Saber Gatams. They also faced off against the Gem Knights. Although they were sometimes overwhelmed by the weaker Gem Knights, this experience strengthened their punches and kicks. This training continued for 2 months, followed by 8 months of sword training. Souza allowed Issei's parents to choose their weapons. Miki selected a wakizashi and a saber, while Goru chose twin swords. The remainder of their training focused on sword techniques for both attack and defense. Both parents completed the X-Saber training, earning the titles of X-Saber Hyunlei for Miki and X-Saber Urbellum for Goru. Noelia trained the Gusto sisters, Ariel, Rainier, and Milikas, making significant progress in both magical and physical endurance. The mountains were battered by continuous snowstorms, and the monolith stood unchanged until the gate opened once more. 2 red-haired figures emerged, wearing the same ancient clothes they had entered with. Issei's old-school uniform was quite snug, showcasing his physique, while Emilia appeared even more stunning than her sister Rias and Aquino. They carried the weapons of Shurit and Emilia Gishki, with Issei slinging one across his back and Emilia holding her staff at her side, the diadem resting on her head. Both bore dragon marks. Emilia had one on her abdomen, while Issei had his on the nape of his neck. Issei remarked on how good it felt to be outside, while Emilia stretched a bit. She then took Issei's hand, expressing the need to gather with the others and her harem sisters. Issei agreed, and they prepared to descend the mountains. Upon arriving in the village, specifically at Noelia's house, They were greeted by her and her friends. They shared stories of their training, and the Hayudo family and the girls boasted about their progress. Issei and Emilia were surprised to see someone they never expected to find. Milikas, Emilia's nephew, joyfully embraced her upon their reunion. Issei inquired how Milikas ended up there, but Milikas suggested they save that topic for another time. He assured them he was ready to support them and reveal everything Surzek's Gremory had done to indulge Rias Gremory. Ariel smiled, stating they would make Surzek's pay dearly, while Goru and Eri Hayudo expressed their determination to punish an ungrateful angel and former nun. Calm reassured Issei and Emilia that they would not be alone in this endeavor, revealing their decision to join Seekvaira's group, surprising both Issei and Emilia. Winda noted how special Seekvaira was to Issei, as was Zenobia Quarta, and they officially accepted both girls as their sisters. Issei was at a loss for words, expressing his gratitude. However, Reese mischievously suggested that in return, Issei should treat them to a night of fun, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Issei and Emilia both turned red at the implication. Souza declared it was time to save two girls as they headed to the backyard. Souza and Noelia began to chant, calling upon the dual-terminal world to open its gates to the real world. A portal opened, and Noelia announced their next destination, Kuo, Japan. Everyone from Noelia's residence, along with Rainier and Milikas, stepped through the portal to return to the DXD world. At Kuo Academy, in the student council room at 3 p.m., the Citri group was busy organizing matters related to the academy. Saji assisted Momo and Ruruko, fulfilling his role as a supportive boyfriend, while the others helped with paperwork for Sona and Tsubaki until they sensed a new presence approaching. Sona shouted in alarm, activating the pocket dimension. She urged everyone to prepare seriously. A white portal appeared, and everyone stood on guard for what might emerge. An overwhelming aura emanated from the portal, making everyone nervous. A voice from the portal asked why they were being so hostile. Sona recognized the voice and tears of joy began to flow. Issei had returned, accompanied by Emilia, the Gusto girls, the Gishki, Souza, and the rejuvenated Hayudo family. Sona excitedly rushed to embrace the now red-haired Issei, while the Citri girls and Saji expressed their disbelief at his transformation. Emilia smiled and confirmed her identity, prompting surprise and jealousy among the Citri girls. She stated firmly that she had renounced her father's surname. Rhea Kusaka inquired about the boys standing with Souza, to which Issei proudly introduced them as his rejuvenated parents. This revelation caused the Citri entourage to faint, except for Sona. Issei asked Sona what had happened during the year they were away. Sona, visibly angry, explained that Rias's group had been searching for him to eliminate him. She revealed that Surzex and Azazel had disguised Jean as the true Issei Hayudo by implanting a boosted gear containing a dragon doppelganger. Issei's expression darkened at the thought of such disrespect from someone he once respected. Sona also mentioned that the raiding game between Seekvaira Agars and Rias was scheduled for the next day. Grateful for the information, Issei decided to reunite with Seekchan and Zenobia. Emilia teleported the dual-terminal group to Agars's territory. In one of the hangars, Seekvaira was focused on her machines, appearing serious but feeling anxious about the upcoming confrontation with Rias Gremory and the girls who had betrayed Issei. Her greatest worry was the absence of Issei. She called out to him in frustration, expressing her determination to find him and deliver a good beating if he didn't fulfill his promise. In her anger, she threw a wrench, unaware that someone had picked it up and assured her that they always kept their promises. Seekvaira turned to see Issei standing before her, and her heart swelled with joy. She approached him, tears of happiness streaming down her face, and scolded him for worrying her so much. Issei, feeling guilty, apologized silently and gently cupped her chin to kiss her, which she returned with enthusiasm. They embraced tightly, their kiss filled with passion, before Issei declared his intention to join her team. As the hangar doors opened, the dual-terminal girls, along with Rainier, Emilia, Issei's parents, and Milikas, entered, all eager to support Seekvaira's noble cause. She was astonished, realizing she could count on a full team less than 24 hours before the raiding game against Rias. Zenobia appeared in a magical circle, surprised to see Issei. She rushed to embrace him, her emotions overwhelming her. Issei reassured her that he would make it up to her for the worry he had caused. He greeted Drake, who expressed joy at seeing Issei alive but sensed a great power within him. Issei promised to explain everything after the raiding game. Zenobia then turned her attention to Emilia and Milikas, excited to see them both alive. Noelia, the heir of Agars, informed everyone that her children and Issei's friends were ready to join Seekvaira's team to confront Rias and her deceitful allies. However, she cautioned that they wouldn't be able to reincarnate any of them with the evil pieces they had. Noelia, with a mischievous smile, proposed to mutate some of Seekvaira's pieces. Understanding her intent, Seekvaira retrieved her evil pieces and handed them to Noelia, who began reciting a spell. The pieces transformed from red to sapphire blue, their power increasing significantly. Satisfied with her work, Noelia assured Seekvaira that she would now be able to reincarnate Issei and his companions without issue. Seekvaira, grateful and serious, decided to start with her tower pieces. Reese Gusto and the brown-haired boy raised their hands, introducing themselves. Seekvaira was surprised to learn that Gorohyudo was Issei's father, leading her to stammer in disbelief. Seekvaira Agars commanded Reese Gusto and Gorohyudo to be reincarnated and bring glory to the Agars clan. As she spoke, the pieces of the tower were absorbed by the bodies of Gusto and Hyudo's patriarch. Seekvaira then turned to the brown-haired woman, who raised her hand, her expression shifting to one of concern. She identified herself as Miki Hyudo. The rejuvenated mother of Issei expressed that they had made the decision to rejuvenate and train for the sake of Seekvaira, whom they considered family. Miki smiled as she mentioned needing to settle accounts with a troublesome group known as Gremry. Hearing this, Seekvaira could no longer contain her happiness, grateful that her in-laws cared for her. She commanded Miki Hyudo to be reincarnated, and the piece of the horse was absorbed by her. Next, Seekvaira called for the bishops, and Winda and Ariel raised their hands. Winda Gusto introduced herself with a bow, while Ariel Gishki, the stoic sorceress, followed suit. Seekvaira ordered them to be reincarnated, and they became her new bishops. Then, Seekvaira turned to the Queen Peace, and a red-haired woman raised her hand. Emilia suggested that Issei had earned that position, surprising him. Everyone present agreed, and Issei accepted the role of queen, which Seekvaira confirmed with her command. Issei began to absorb the Queen Peace, officially becoming Seekvaira's queen. Pons were then reincarnated, including Rainier, Milikas, Calm, and Emilia, each absorbing their respective pieces. Seekvaira informed them that a press conference would occur in about 3 hours, expressing her gratitude for their invaluable assistance. Reese reminded her that they had come at Issei's request and accepted them as sisters in the harem. Seekvaira blushed at the compliment, her thoughts racing. She nervously suggested it was time to prepare for the press conference. Issei, with a mischievous smile, declared it was time to surprise those who dared to usurp his name and show that with Issei Hyudo and the newly formed Agars entourage, no one could interfere. Seekvaira smiled, confident that Rias had made a grave mistake, and she intended to prove it by preventing her from becoming the queen of the raiding games, demonstrating the loyalty and true love that Rias's group lacked. Thus, the new Agars entourage set off to prepare for the press conference. To be continued. In a conference room at 7 p.m., many reporters gathered to begin interviews with the two contenders. Cameras were ready, and among the attendees were the two Maos, Surzex and Serafal, along with Azizel and Penemu. They watched the spectacle with satisfaction. Grafia was present with her partner Venelana, accompanied by Vale and Serorg, who supported Seekvaira while casting disapproving glances at the four leaders. A voice announced the entrance of the contenders, Rias Gremry and Seekvaira Agars. Rias appeared with an air of confidence, flanked by Issei, while Seekvaira, maintaining her usual seriousness, was escorted by Zenobia as they took their seats. The first question came from Yuzu Hiragi of the Infraspectacular newspaper. She directed her question to Seekvaira. noting that Seekvaira had only one piece in her noble lineage, the former knight of Gremory, Zenobia Corda. Yuzu asked about the reason for Zenovia's presence in Seekvaira's entourage and whether Seekvaira would have her full nobility by the next day. Seekvaira took the microphone and greeted everyone politely. She answered Yuzu directly, stating that Zenobia had differences with her former master, casting a glare at Rias, who maintained an arrogant smile. Regarding the second question, Seekvaira preferred to leave it in suspense. The reporters raised their hands, and the organizer selected a short-haired blonde. Nishino Tsukasa from Fireword asked Issei if he could defeat Seekvaira Agars and her known piece without difficulty. Issei responded arrogantly, claiming that any opponent in his path would be defeated by him, the great Sekir Udai, while materializing the boosted gear. Murmurs of concern spread among the security personnel, and the expressions of Surzex, Serafal, Azazel, and Penemu reflected a mix of amusement and disapproval, while Venelana, Grafia, Vale, and Serorg showed visible displeasure at Issei's bravado. The organizer then pointed to a girl with orange pigtails, Koko Akashiya from Infrachismes. She referenced a rumor from a year ago, suggesting that if Gremory's entourage defeated Agars's, Issei would marry all the girls present. The Gremory girls smiled, and Kiba and Gasper cheered for their master and friend, while Issei stood up with a proud demeanor. Issei confirmed the rumor, stating that after they defeated Seekvaira and Zenobia, everyone was invited to the magnificent wedding organized by his brother-in-law, the Honorable Mao Surzex. The crowd murmured in approval. Seekvaira, with a challenging smile, doubted Issei would make it to the wedding after the raiding game and questioned his ability to defeat her. Issei, with disdain, asked if she dared to challenge him, but Seekvaira merely smiled provocatively, asserting that she had no fear of someone like him. She specialized in putting arrogant people in their place, mocking Gremory's entourage, which angered them. Issei approached Seekvaira, suggesting a last-minute wager. If he won, she would marry him that day. The Gremory girls shook their heads, but a glint of malice appeared in their eyes. Whispers of impending defeat for Seekvaira circulated among the reporters. Seekvaira accepted the challenge, stating that if she won, a request would be granted to someone she valued, and Issei's wedding would be cancelled. Issei, confident, suggested she surrender and join his glorious harem, attempting to caress her cheek. However, Seekvaira sharply swatted his hand away, expressing her disgust. She declared that she would rather be dead than be engaged or married to someone like him, leaving everyone stunned. Surzex ordered Seekvaira to respect Issei as her future fiancé, to which Seekvaira retorted that respect is earned, glaring at the Mao and leaving him furious. The reporters were taken aback, knowing that addressing a Mao by their family name instead of their title signified a lack of recognition. Issei then approached Seekvaira with the intent to intimidate her, threatening her with violence. However, he suddenly found himself unable to move, struggling in confusion. Footsteps echoed as a voice interrupted the tension, warning Issei not to touch Seekvaira. The doors opened to reveal the real Issei Hayudo and Emilia Bale, leading a group of hooded figures. The room erupted in excitement as cameras flashed, capturing the unexpected entrance. Surzex and Azazel displayed a mix of surprise and anger, while Serafal and Penemu looked on with horror and disdain. Grafia and Venelana, however, gazed at the now scarlet-haired Issei with admiration. The bisexual couple liked their lips at the sight of Issei, smiling as they noticed their daughter. They remarked on how much Emilia had changed. Serorg and Valley grinned at the presence of Issei Hayudo. Issei, Emilia, and the hooded figures approached the conference table, standing beside Seekvaira and looking with indifference at Issei and the Gremory family. The organizers shouted in disbelief at the sight of two Issei Hayudos, causing murmurs of confusion to ripple through the crowd. "He's an imposter," declared Issei, anger and nervousness evident in his voice. "I am Issei Hayudo." Emilia shot a fierce glare at the brown-haired figure, telling him to be quiet. Rias, filled with hatred, ordered her younger sister to stay out of the matter. Emilia, unfazed, retorted that she was not a Gremory but proudly a Bale, exciting the reporters and infuriating Rias. "I am Emilia Bale." A pawn of Seekvaira Agar's. Rias and Surzex were stunned by their sister's rejection of their father's name. While Venelana remained calm on the outside, her mind racing with pride. Emilia! You traitor! Rias seethed, anger boiling over at her sister's allegiance to Seekvaira. Issei, indifferent, addressed Rias, pointing out her choice of words. Rias fell silent, unable to contain her disdain for him. Aquino, furious, shouted at the red-haired figure, demanding to know who he thought he was to speak to Rias Gremry. With a smile, Issei introduced himself as Hyudo Issei, the queen piece of Seekvaira Agar's, which thrilled the reporters. He explained that the hooded figures were part of the honorable heir's entourage, teasing that they would be introduced the next day. He proposed a thrilling twist. If either Issei lost, the losing Issei would be exiled from the supernatural realm, have their memory erased, and all their powers stripped away. Excitement buzzed through the crowd, and Surzex, wearing a sinister smile, accepted the challenge. Issei then added two more things for Rias, that Irina Shidu, Kuroka's ordinary cat, and Lu Fei Pendragon could assist her, and more importantly, that tomorrow would not be a wedding but a funeral procession for her fiancé, due to her interference with him and his family. This declaration left Rias furious as Seekvaira's entourage exited through a magic circle. After the press conference, the media and entertainment industry buzzed with excitement. Such challenges and insults had rarely been seen in a simple exhibition rating game, but the presence of two Issei Hyudos was the highlight. Surzex and Azazel were on edge, not expecting the real Issei to show up, yet they had confidence that Issei and his sealed dragon doppelganger would triumph over Seekvaira Agar's. The day of the rating game arrived. In the arena, Seekvaira Agar's faced Rias Gremry. The stands were packed with demons and beings from other factions, all eager to witness a monumental clash filled with threats and critical challenges. Everyone anticipated an unforgettable rating game. In the VIP area, Surzex, Seraphal, Azazel, and Penemu wore wicked smiles. Across from them, a large group of leaders from various factions, including angels, yokai, Asgard, vampires, and Olympians, gathered to support Seekvaira unconditionally. In the stands, Sona's entourage, along with Razor and his group, Serorg, and Venelana with her partner Grafia, watched intently, all supporting the true Issei and Seekvaira. The first to launch an attack was Kiba. He expressed his anger towards Issei, vowing never to forgive him for what he had done to Bucho and the girls a year ago. He also blamed Issei for the end of his relationship with Tsubaki, invoking his sacred sword. Kiba believed it would have been easy for Issei to surrender Drake and end his own suffering, but instead he prolonged his agony. Issei responded, dismissing Kiba's words and stating that Tsubaki had chosen loyalty, which he appreciated about her. He remarked that a certain traitorous blonde and a cross-dressing vampire had revealed their true selves to him. Issei challenged Kiba to give him his best shot to see if he was worth the effort. Kiba, filled with rage, charged at Issei, but suddenly he was halted by a sacred lance piercing his stomach, moved by one of the hooded figures. Kiba coughed up blood, struggling to speak. The hooded figure, annoyed by his voice, conjured a sword of sacred energy and swiftly struck Kiba's neck, eliminating him in an instant. The referee announced in shock that a knight of Rias Gremry had been eliminated. The Gremry family was stunned by how easily Kiba had been defeated. When the hooded figure removed her cloak, Rias and Azazel were horrified to see Rainier, who they believed had been dead for a long time. Rias shouted in surprise and anger at Rainier, who, in her usual Dinrex attire, looked seriously at the Gremry family. Rainier revealed that she had returned to support the one she truly loved and knew what they had tried to do to Issei's parents a year ago. Asia trembled in fear at Rainier's words, but Irina stepped forward to defend her. Irina declared she wouldn't let Rainier approach Asia, spreading her white wings. Rainier responded, claiming she was more than just a fallen being, she was a Dark Lord. Her body transformed, sprouting 4 pairs of dark wings, her attire changing to a black dress, and her skin darkening, revealing her new appearance. Everyone felt the drastic shift in power, realizing Rainier could easily surpass a cadre. In the VIP room, Azazel and Penemu swallowed nervously at the sight of the new Rainier. Back in the arena, Rias expressed her impatience to marry Gasper. At that moment, the vampire activated his time-stopping power, freezing Issei and the rest of Agar's entourage. Rias commanded her team to attack, confident they would emerge victorious. Rias triumphantly declared that they had messed with the wrong person. However, Seekvaira shouted for Ariel, and one of the hooded figures revealed a staff, beginning to drain the energy surrounding Agar's group, including Gasper. Gasper cried out in distress as he felt his magic being drained. Rias ordered a ceasefire, halting the attack. The hooded figure revealed herself as Ariel Gishki, the bishop of Seekvaira Agars, ready to fight. In the VIP room, Serafal recognized Ariel and angrily recalled the injuries she had caused her. Surzex also began to seethe with anger, realizing they were facing those who had humiliated his sister and her entourage a year ago. Back in the arena, Ariel unleashed a magical circle emblazoned with the Gishki emblem, announcing a transformation ritual. As her body began to glow, everyone in the arena was awestruck by the surge of power. Ariel's transformation grew in size until she revealed her new form. The beast roared, sending chills through the Gremory family. Ravel was shocked and questioned what she was witnessing. Ariel identified herself as Evagishki Mind August, preparing to unleash a devastating attack on Gasper. Overcome with fear, Gasper was helpless as the powerful attack surged toward him. Just then, Ravel intervened with a defensive barrier, but it was easily shattered by the force of Mind August, impacting both Ravel and Gasper. They cried out in pain as the attack injured them and left them unconscious, eliminating them from the match. The referee announced the elimination of Ravel Phoenix, trembling at the destructive power of Mind August, which had destabilized the pocket dimension for a moment. The arena fell silent, stunned by Ariel Gishki's display of power, before erupting into cheers for Agars. The Gremory family and their allies began to feel fear as they faced Agar's entourage. Kaneko, terrified, asked who they were. Emilia smiled, declaring they were a true entourage, a real family, unlike the Gremorys, whom she called a group of self-interested individuals led by the so-called queen. Kuroka shouted that she wouldn't allow Emilia to insult Rias, launching an attack with Senjutsu. Lu Fei retaliated with her own magical attack, while Kaneko also unleashed her Senjutsu. The three magical attacks headed toward Emilia, but a wall of wind dissipated them effortlessly. Kuroka was bewildered by the sudden wind as three hooded figures intervened for Emilia. Grateful, Emilia revealed the three green-haired individuals who had humiliated the Gremory entourage a year ago. Kuroka shouted upon seeing the Gusto sisters. Reese, with a smirk, remarked that she would take care of the black cat. Kam declared that he would handle the BSTRD daughter of Morgana, referring to Lu Fei. Winda confidently stated that she would deal with the white cat, eyeing Kaneko. Rias could no longer contain her anger at the insult to her younger sister and commanded them to defeat their opponents. The three girls responded fiercely, charging into battle. In the match between Kaneko and Winda, the Nikomata engaged in close combat, launching attacks that Winda skillfully dodged. Winda taunted Kaneko, criticizing her speed and potential. Kaneko retorted, reminding Winda that she should not have interfered in Rias's affairs with Issei, who should have been dead. Winda defended her beloved, asserting that she would not allow Kaneko's actions to go unpunished. Kaneko, fueled by anger, attempted a high kick, but Winda anticipated the move. She knocked Kaneko off balance with a swift kick to her support foot and, channeling wind magic through her staff, slammed Kaneko to the ground. Winda prepared her devastating attack, calling forth a storm of energy. As green lightning surrounded Winda, it shot into the sky and then struck Kaneko with a powerful impact. Kaneko cried out in pain as the electric surge overwhelmed her, leaving her clothes in tatters and her body smoking from severe burns. Winda turned her back on the defeated Nikomata, declaring that it was for Issei as Kaneko faded into particles of light. The referee announced that one of Rias Gremory's towers had been eliminated. In the duel between Lu Fei and Kam, Lu Fei unleashed spells from above, but Kam effortlessly dissipated them with his wind magic. He coldly questioned her abilities, suggesting that her ancestors would be ashamed of her. Lu Fei, enraged, shouted back, accusing Calm of defending Issei, whom she believed deserved to be erased from existence. Realizing her slip, she quickly covered her mouth, but it only fueled Calm's anger. He unleashed a powerful aura, causing the winds to buffet Lu Fei on her flying broom. Calm warned Lu Fei that with his next attack, she would reconsider her choices. He invoked his technique, summoning a massive tornado that engulfed her. The winds howled violently, tearing at her clothes and shaking her fiercely. The destruction was evident as her broom shattered under the force of the storm. In the VIP room, Ajuka watched in awe at the tornado's power, using a magical device to measure its intensity. He was horrified to discover it was classified as an F5, a level of tornado that only deities could conjure. Hades smirked, suggesting it would be a miracle if Lu Fei survived. Back in the arena, the relentless punishment continued for Lu Fei, who screamed in agony until her voice fell silent. Calm effortlessly dispelled the tornado, revealing a semi-conscious Lu Fei falling from the sky. He turned away, stating it was for Issei as she vanished into light. The referee excitedly announced that Lu Fei Pendragon was eliminated. Kuroka, enraged by the elimination of her sister and Lu Fei, charged at Reese with renewed ferocity, unleashing senjutsu attacks that Reese easily dodged. Kuroka vowed to make Reese pay for her sister's defeat. Reese, unfazed, mocked Kuroka's aspirations of having strong kittens with her partner, Jean. Kuroka, furious, prepared a powerful senjutsu attack, while Reese took a combat stance. As Kuroka unleashed her devastating blow, Reese charged directly at it. The spectators gasped, with Sona expressing disbelief at Reese's reckless approach. However, her companions remained calm, confident that Kuroka's attack lacked the necessary power to harm Reese. In the arena, Reese collided with Kuroka's attack, effortlessly splitting it in two. Kuroka was horrified to see one of her best moves rendered ineffective. Reese, moving at incredible speed, dismantled Kuroka's attack completely and faced her with a fierce determination. She unleashed a swift strike with her staff, making contact with Kuroka's abdomen. Kuroka, confused and shocked, felt a sudden rush of pain as she began to bleed. As her strength waned, she fell to the ground, her eyes losing their light. Reese looked down at her with disdain, declaring that Kuroka did not deserve Issei. With a lost expression, Kuroka faded from the arena, leaving her humiliation behind. The referee announced that Kuroka Hellcat was eliminated. To be continued. The arena was filled with noise and excitement. It had been a long time since such a commotion erupted, especially after Daihauser Belial claimed the championship by defeating Roygun Belphegor. The crowd roared with a similar intensity as they watched an exhibition rating game between two novice demons. On one side was Rias Gremory, the younger sister of the current Mao, Surzex Lucifer, and a well-known figure for her role in sealing the Trihexa and defeating the Chaos Brigade. On the other side was Seekvaira Agars, known as the Hasmarer of the underworld, who was obsessed with mechas and recognized for her beauty, albeit also for her bad temper. However, the scene unfolding was unexpected and left both Surzex and Azazel embarrassed, as Rias Gremory's legendary and undefeated team found themselves in a dire situation. They were being outmatched by Agar's newly formed squad. Rias had lost half of her team, while Agar's representatives had only sent 5 fighters who had not exerted themselves at all. Rias and her remaining teammates watched in horror as their companions were eliminated by the allies of their new enemy, Issei Hayu. Rias, terrified, questioned the nature of her opponents, expressing disbelief at the cruelty displayed by the Gusto tribe sisters. Reese, wiping Kuroka's blood from her staff, responded that they were simply beings looking out for their friend and their king, dismissing the bloodied cloth with disdain. Irina, enraged, charged at Reese with Excalibur Mimic, only to be intercepted by Zenobia, who defended Reese with Durandal, stating her disdain for Irina's self-proclaimed angelic status. Reese smiled at Zenobia, assuring her that the angel was all hers, stepping aside to join Seekvaira. Zenobia then confronted Irina, questioning her claim to be an angel after betraying her childhood friend, who had risked his life for her well-being, only for her to abandon him for someone who stole his glory. Irina defiantly declared that she had done the right thing, expressing her twisted gratitude to Rias Gremory for introducing her to a great man who made her feel like a true woman. Issei, however, regarded her with indifference, though a smile crept onto his face. Issei then shouted for Michael, the overlord of heaven, who was watching the scene unfold with disapproval. Michael addressed Irina, expressing his disappointment over her actions and revealing a playing card he held, the Ace of Spades. He explained that this card evaluated all her deeds, linked to each of his saints, and that it would reveal whether she was worthy of being an angel or would fall due to her sins. Irina pleaded with Michael, but he declared it was too late, channeling sacred energy into the card. As the ace manifested, it unleashed a series of electric attacks on Irina, who screamed in agony as her radiant wings turned black and her sacred aura became corrupted. She fell to her knees, crying out for Michael, questioning why this was happening to her. Michael coldly reminded her that her actions had consequences, and the crowd was left in shock at the fall of an angel, especially one of Michael's saints. Serzex, furious, demanded to know why Michael had done this, but the overlord simply stated it was a matter concerning his faction. In the arena, Irina wept in despair over her downfall, her cries interrupted by Zenobia, who demanded to know what it felt like to experience such pain in her heart, the same pain Issei felt when she betrayed him. Irina, furious, flew at Zenobia, but two hooded figures intervened, protecting her and knocking Irina to the ground. One of the figures revealed himself as the rejuvenated Gorohayadu, while the other was the revitalized Miki Hayu. They declared their intent to protect Issei's betrothed from Irina's wrath. Irina, furious, demanded they step aside, but Miki warned her she would have to defeat them first. As they activated their X-Saber armaments, Irina, enraged, dismissed Mimic and unleashed her sacred energy at them. However, Hyunli and Erbellum effortlessly dodged her attacks, which only fueled her anger until she made a reckless move. In a surprising turn, Miki countered Irina's attack, leaving her wounded and on her knees. Miki expressed disdain for Irina's betrayal, suggesting that if her father could see her now, he would agree she deserved punishment for her actions. Irina, weak and filled with hatred, asked who Miki's son was, struggling to comprehend the situation. Miki reminded her of the sweet brown-haired boy who had helped her, the one she had promised to be a guardian angel for. Miki shouted in surprise, startling Irina, who looked at the brown-haired woman and suddenly saw the figure of the woman who once wanted to be her mother-in-law. Miki continued, expressing her anger towards Irina, who was beginning to lose her composure, tears streaming down her face. Gora held Irina's black wings firmly, declaring that she did not deserve to be a fallen angel after what she had done to his son. Irina, terrified, pleaded for mercy as she felt her wings being forcefully stretched. Zenobia approached Goru, raising X-Durandal high. Irina begged for mercy, but it was too late. With a swift motion, Zenobia struck, causing Irina to cry out in pain as her left wing was severed. The next moment, Irina screamed again as her right wing met the same fate. Rias watched in horror as the scene unfolded, feeling utterly powerless. "Asia, heal Irina!" Rias shouted, her voice filled with panic. Asia, determined, rushed forward to invoke her twin light healing, but then tragedy struck. Asia gasped in shock as her arms were suddenly severed at the elbows, causing her to scream in agony. Miki stood nearby, her sword stained with blood, declaring that they deserved the harshest punishment. Asia, with tears in her eyes, called out to her mother. Miki shouted at Asia to be quiet while threatening her with her sword, and Gor followed suit, eliminating Irina with a swift strike. Rias was horrified, crying out for her fallen friends. The referee announced the grim outcome: one piece of Gremory is eliminated. Irina Shidu is eliminated. The arena fell silent at the brutal display of power from the Hyudo patriarchs against the former angel and nun. Rias, Aquino, Rosweiss, and especially Issei were left in shock, having never witnessed such cruelty before. Issei looked into Rias's eyes and questioned why she was terrified, reminding her of the consequences of her actions. He coldly stated that her beloved entourage would now be in a hospital bed, which only fueled Rias's rage. "You ruined our wedding. Today you will die, Issei. Rias screamed, launching a sphere of destruction at him. Emilia intervened, invoking her sacred gear, the Mirror of Gishki, which began to absorb Rias's attack. Rias, furious at her sister's interference, demanded an explanation for her newfound power. Emilia promised that she would soon find out, as the Gishki emblem appeared on the mirror. She called forth the Gishki art, transformation, and the mirror released energy that transformed her into a colossal creature, glowing with power. The transformation let out a fearsome roar, leaving Rosweiss in disbelief at the sheer power of Emilia's new form. Rias called out to Aquino and Rosweiss for assistance in defeating Emilia, while instructing Issei to handle the imposter. The battle commenced, with Emilia attacking with Asgardian magic, which she repelled with her tentacles, knocking Aquino to the ground. The audience was stunned by Rias's defeat at the hands of her younger sister, Emilia. They were filled with a mix of excitement and terror at the sight of Issei's imposing transformation, his colossal ice dragon form wrapping around the arena, emanating a chilling aura that sent shivers through everyone within a 6-kilometer radius. The leaders of the Alliance and the Council of Elders were taken aback, never expecting Seekvaira Agars, once considered a laughingstock, to gain such powerful allies who treated Rias's entourage like mere punching bags. Michael thought to himself, overwhelmed by the sight of the colossal ice dragon. Ajuka, Odin, Shiva, and Barakiel swallowed hard, recognizing the danger posed by Seekvaira's servants. Meanwhile, Gabriel, Elmenahild, Valerie, and Yasaka were ecstatic to see their beloved Issei again. In the arena, Emilia and Ariel returned to their normal forms, while Issei's dragon form dissipated into mist, returning him to his human state. Medical personnel rushed to transport Rias, who remained unconscious, to the hospital. Silence enveloped the arena until a child began to clap, followed by others, until the VIP section erupted in applause for the Agar's entourage. "Bravo!" Some demons cheered. "Superb!" others shouted. "Well done, Agar's entourage!" children exclaimed. Surzex, Azazel, Seraphal, and Penemu were in disbelief, feeling as though they were trapped in a nightmare. They had witnessed the humiliation and defeat of Rias's group, and now the entire underworld was cheering for the Agar's clan, a victory they had never anticipated. The two Maos and their respective followers decided to take action, teleporting to confront Agar's entourage. Once on the arena, Surzex, Seraphal, Azazel, and Penemu, newly arrived, glared at their enemies. The Agars, particularly Emilia, regarded them with indifference, mocking her brother. The traitorous leaders prepared to act. Surzex, visibly furious, commanded the guards to arrest Agar's entourage. The other leaders, excluding Azazel, Seraphal, and Penemu, were taken aback by the red-haired demon's decision. Immediately, many demons took to the air, landing on the sand and threatening the Agar's entourage with their spears, which the latter ignored. Surzex declared that the Agar's entourage was under arrest for the death of the Pillar of the Alliance, Sekyudii Haidu Issei, demanding they surrender their weapons. Seraphal added that if they surrendered peacefully, their deaths would be swift, glaring at Issei with disdain. In the stands, Venelana and Graphia were beginning to seethe at the audacity of Surzex and Seraphal for continuing their lies. Sona was worried about Issei, his friends Seekvaira, Zenobia, and their allies. However, Souza and Noelia remained calm and even found amusement in the situation, knowing that Seekvaira's entourage could easily overpower them. Back in the arena, Agar's entourage remained utterly calm until Issei spoke up. He addressed Surzex and Seraphal, questioning their actions and condemning the fate of several demons to certain death for following their arrogant orders and the whims of Seraphal. Surzex, enraged, shouted for Issei to be killed. As the demons prepared to attack, one guard noticed his spear beginning to freeze, and then exclaimed about his legs being frozen up to the waist. The guards were quickly immobilized, their weapons useless, leaving Surzex's army effectively incapacitated. The Maos were oblivious to when the ice magic had been cast, while the guards looked on in terror at Issei and the others. Issei shouted that Surzex and Seraphal should not condemn these demons to death when a dimensional rift opened in the middle of the arena, revealing two gothic girls and a red-haired figure with serious expressions. Everyone in the arena recognized Ophis, Lilith, and the Great Red. Azazel accused the red-haired figure of having killed Issei. Serzex shouted that the Great Red had killed their Issei and pleaded for the hero and pillar of the factions to return. The Great Red silenced them with an intimidating gaze, causing the four traitors to cease their pleas. The Great Red and Ophis turned their attention to Issei and Emilia. Ophis confirmed the identity of the young dragon, Bryanak, and the Great Red sensed the power and souls residing within Emilia and Issei, smiling as he recognized their return. Lilith innocently asked if they were her grandparents, to which Ophis and the Great Red nodded. Serzex, in a frenzy, demanded that they be killed for their betrayal, but Ophis silenced him with a distorted voice, warning him that he did not give orders and that she could easily defeat him. The Great Red approached Issei, expressing joy at seeing him again and taking his sword, feeling honored to sense the presence of Bryanak and Trishula. The sword began to glow as Bryanak's voice echoed, and Trishula reminisced about the promise made long ago to become strong. The Great Red laughed at the memories. Meanwhile, Ophis and Lilith greeted Emilia, with Ophis acknowledging the increase in her power since they last met. The four leaders were astonished to see the two dragon gods conversing with Issei and Emilia's weapons. They watched as the Infinite Dragon and the Great Red aligned themselves with Agar's entourage, declaring their support. The leaders were shocked, realizing their last hopes had betrayed them. In the VIP section, other leaders smiled at the decision made by the dragon gods. However, Serzex was now truly furious, declaring Ophis and the Great Red traitors to the alliance. The dragons were about to respond when Issei and Emilia placed a hand on their shoulders, signaling them to hold back. Issei proposed a quick resolution through battle, offering to fight alongside Emilia and the hooded pawn who had not participated in the raiding game. Serzex, furious, agreed to the terms, stating he would fight with Azazel and Seraphal, ordering Penemu to return to the VIP area. The guards were commanded to retreat as the ice binding them melted, and they fled in fear. Serzex declared that if they won, Issei would surrender his weapons, and all of Seekvaira Agar's entourage would be tortured and executed for treason against the underworld and for the death of Seekvaira Haida Issei. Seekvaira scoffed in annoyance, while Zenobia felt a surge of anger, and the others expressed their indignation. Issei countered that if they won, the four of them would be removed from their positions as leaders in their respective factions, unleashing their auras that rivaled those of their opponents. Honorable Demon Council, do you support this decision? Serzex asked, to which the elders watching all nodded without hesitation. Very well, one of the elders shouted, but they will fight in special pocket dimensions. The elder pulled 3 artifacts from his cloak, teleporting them into the hands of the Maus and Cadre. Seekchan and the others, please move to the stands. This is about to get intense, Issei said, smiling at his king, who nodded back, blushing slightly. Be careful, Seekvaira said, giving him a kiss. Break his face, Reese said with a smile. Make him regret what he did to you, Zenobia said to the hooded pawn, who nodded in response. Agar's entourage withdrew from the arena, leaving Issei, Emilia, and the mysterious pawn. I'll take care of the vulture, Issei said, referring to Azazel. I'll handle the annoying one, Emilia said, looking disdainfully at Seraphal. Then I'll fight against the pawn, Serzex said, eyeing the hooded figure with malice, but the pawn remained unfazed. Serzex, Azazel, and Seraphal activated the dimensions where they would fight, disappearing with their opponents. The atmosphere grew tense as the 6 contenders glared at each other with intense animosity, ready to clash. Suddenly, they all launched into action, engaging in a battle where their powers surged so violently that the raiding game arena trembled as if an earthquake were occurring. The spectators were filled with fear, having never witnessed 2 of the Maus in combat. Sona and Issei's allies watched nervously, knowing that while Seraphal could be childish, she was a powerful and terrifying woman when things got serious. Emilia faced Seraphal, who attempted to land punches and kicks infused with icy energy, but Emilia blocked them effortlessly. You wretched Gremory scum! Why do you always ruin your honorable sister's plans? Seraphal shouted, glaring at Emilia with contempt. Oh, the annoying one is angry, Emilia said, smirking mockingly at the furious Mao. Let me put it simply. I stopped seeing Rias Gremory as my sister the moment she supported the BSRD who divorced my mother, all because he lacked the Gremory power. I also remember how she celebrated when Surzex got rid of my nephew to eliminate Issei. But I'm glad that impostor is dead. You wretched! I swear you will all pay for the death of the man I loved. Serafal yelled, landing a kick that Emilia blocked, but it still pushed her back a few meters. I should have banished you from the underworld along with your mother and the traitor Lucifuge, you powerless, filthy demon. Emilia smiled darkly, her aura beginning to unsettle Serafal. I'll tell you one thing, Serafal. I never needed demonic power because I possess a strength that can surpass the power of factions, leaving you utterly humiliated for daring to insult one of the most cherished people in my life, she said, pulling a staff from her hip. Sacred gear. Nikraz rod. The staff began to glow. Balance breaker. Nikraz of Gungnir. As Emilia transformed, her outfit changed to a navy blue top that covered her chest and abdomen, with long sleeves extending to her mid-triceps and navy blue stockings. Minimal armor appeared on Emilia, including the wings of the dragon Gungnir and a belt with a dragon tail. A helmet reflecting the dragon's head materialized, and her eyes shifted from reddish to yellow, taking on a sharp appearance. Seeing her opponent's transformation made Serafal extremely nervous as she sensed draconic power, but the other power was unknown to her. Alright, so, now it's my turn to attack, Emilia said, and in an impressive burst of speed, she was suddenly inches away from Serafal. The Mao was horrified to see her opponent so close, ready to strike, but Emilia was faster. With a powerful blow, Emilia struck Serafal, sending her flying. Emilia pursued her, landing another hit to her forehead that sent Serafal soaring through the air. For a while, Emilia toyed with Serafal, who struggled to react to Emilia's relentless attacks. Every time Serafal tried to stabilize herself, Emilia was already connecting another blow. In the raiding game arena, everyone watched in awe as Emilia, a demon without power, humiliated Serafal Leviathan, one of the most powerful women in the underworld. In the stands, Venelana and Grafia cheered for their daughter and future sister of the harem. Go, Emilia! Grafia shouted. You can do it, daughter. Venelana encouraged. Sona felt a twinge of pity for her older sister, but deep down, she knew Serafal deserved this for attempting to harm Issei. Poor Serafal, Sona said with a malicious smile. It's time for you to pay for your foolish arrogance. In the VIP room, the leaders supporting Issei watched in astonishment as Emilia dominated Serafal. Penemu, on the other hand, looked on in horror as her harem sister was brutally beaten by someone they despised. Back in the pocket dimension, Emilia finished her combo of punches and kicks by slamming Serafal into the ground with a powerful strike from above. As the red-haired girl descended calmly, using the wings of the dragon Gungnir, she remarked coldly, "It seems the pathetic annoying one can't take it anymore. I don't understand how a woman with such pathetic power was elevated to Mao," she said with disgust. "Just as weak as that foolish Gremory and the BSRD of my brother, who only ridicules the name of Lucifer." Serafal struggled to rise, her face bruised and battered, blood trickling from her wounds. Her outfit was torn and nearly destroyed. "You wretched! You will pay!" Serafal shouted, unfurling her 10 demon wings and soaring into the sky of the pocket dimension. She raised a hand, gathering her demonic energy. No one will humiliate me, and you will pay for the death of the man I loved." She screamed, glaring down at Emilia with intense hatred, while Emilia remained indifferent. Die! Celsius cross trigger. Serafal had created a colossal sphere of demonic power and immediately launched it toward Emilia. She simply closed her eyes, but a smile spread across her face as she thought about what she had long awaited. Then, a tremendous explosion erupted. The lights immediately went out, and in the eastern arena, the Gremory symbol appeared, revealing the entourage led by Issei and Rias, while their supporters watched with complete confidence in their victory. There were some cheers, but many boos, which annoyed them. From the western side, the Agar's logo emerged, and Seekvaira's entourage appeared, led by her Issei and Emilia. Rias remarked that it seemed they would have to do things the hard way, flashing a confident smile at the red-haired girl. She expressed hope that Seekvaira had thought about her wedding dress, assuring her that she would be happy with them. Seekvaira, turning her back, retorted that she would not be happy in this life or the next and urged Rias to talk less and fight more. Then the referee appeared, announcing that this would be a rating game in Battle Royale mode, where victory would go to whoever defeated the opposing king. He asked if the Gremory team was ready, to which Rias nodded, and then inquired if the Agar's team was ready, receiving their affirmation. The referee declared the start of the battle. In the stands, Venelana, Grafia, and Sona were horrified to witness Serafal unleash her monstrous power upon Emilia. Venelana cried out in shock, while Sona expressed her horror, knowing that Serafal's move would leave the opponent with a survival rate of less than 1%. Issei's allies were terrified by Serafal's action against Emilia. Some, like Tomo and Rhea, began to cry, while others, including Vale, Razor, and Zenobia, grew furious. However, the girls from the duel terminal remained calm, though their expressions were serious. In the VIP room, the leaders closed their eyes in a sign of distress over Emilia's apparent demise, except for Penemu, who smiled with delight, pleased that Serafal had done her job well. Back in the battlefield, the desert was practically frozen, and snow began to fall gently from the sky as Serafal descended toward her opponent, who was encased in a block of ice. Laughing maniacally, Serafal admitted that Emilia had given her a good fight but deemed it foolish for her to think she could win. She declared that Emilia would pay with her life for hurting Rias and prepared to deliver the final blow, covering her fist with demonic energy. Suddenly, Serafal collapsed to the ground, feeling a monstrous aura. Confused and nervous, she wondered about the source of this power, realizing that only she and Emilia were present. She could not believe it. Emilia should have been dead. Emilia's voice echoed, questioning if she was truly dead. She remarked that the feared attack had felt like a refreshing breeze to her. As the block of ice began to crack, Serafal watched in disbelief as Emilia stood unharmed, brushing off the frost from her beautiful dress. In shock, Serafal exclaimed that it was impossible for Emilia to be unscathed. Emilia thanked her for the attack, stating that it had only made her stronger, and her aura began to expand, causing the pocket dimension to snow violently, resembling a fierce snowstorm that terrified Serafal. This aura was so powerful that it overshadowed the Trihex's might. In the other pocket dimensions, Issei and the hooded pawn felt the energy and simply smiled, declaring that Serafal was a dead woman, which enraged Surzex and Azazel. Back at the confrontation, the snowstorm intensified, enveloping Emilia until she was lost within it. Serafal struggled to see through the weather phenomenon, but as the energy calmed slightly, the sound of footsteps began to resonate throughout the dimension. Serafal, exhausted, dazed, and anxious, could only hear the footsteps approaching until she saw Emilia Gremory. The colossal creature that had become the red-haired girl seemed to embody death itself. The colossal dragon roared fiercely in Serafal's face, sending a chill down her spine. The roar was louder than Bryanak's, sending shivers through many in the underworld. Serafal felt a surge of terror as the dragon declared that she would pay for her betrayal of Issei. With a swift and brutal motion, the dragon seized Serafal's head, applying pressure that made her cry out in pain. The dragon taunted her, saying that this was nothing compared to the pain she had caused Issei, calling her an ungrateful demon. With a powerful strike, the dragon slammed Serafal down, continuing to torment her by crushing her head. Serafal cried out for help, tears streaming down her face, but the dragon coldly informed her that no one would come to her aid. As the dragon began to tear at Serafal's wings with violent intent, she pinned Serafal down, leaving her with only one wing in a critical state. Serafal wept in agony and despair, pleading for it to stop, questioning why this was happening to her. The dragon responded, explaining that she was avenging her beloved Issei, who had done so much for Serafal only to be betrayed. In that moment, Serafal was flooded with memories of her time with Issei, from their happiest moments to the hardest times, recalling how she had been convinced by Rias Gremory to abandon him. Overcome with emotional pain, Seraphol lamented her betrayal, realizing the depth of her mistakes. The dragon, filled with rage, struck Seraphol's back, producing a sickening crack that echoed through the arena. Seraphol screamed in horror, feeling her legs go numb, questioning what had been done to her. The dragon coldly informed her that this was just the beginning of her punishment, preparing a blast of ice in her mouth, commanding her to disappear. The icy blast struck Seraphol, encasing her in a block of ice. The arena bore witness to the brutal and humiliating defeat of the Mao Leviathan, Seraphol Citri, at the hands of Emilia. The crowd was left in shock at how Seraphol had been defeated and humiliated, but suddenly they noticed the pocket dimension collapsing. An elder from the council remarked on the dragon's power exceeding that of the dimension, urging another elder to deactivate it and extract them from there. As the dimension was deactivated, a block of ice containing the frozen Mao appeared. When Emilia landed, the ground trembled as if shaken by an earthquake, revealing the colossal dragon radiating a devastating power. The leaders felt an overwhelming pressure, recalling the fear they had felt when facing the Trihexa. As the dragon roared, the demons trembled in fear, anticipating another attack. However, they watched as the powerful creature began to glow, gradually shrinking and transforming back into a human form, resembling a red-haired girl. Emilia appeared fatigued and began to sway, but before she could fall, someone caught her. She called out to her mother, seeing Venelana, who had come to help her. With a warm smile, Venelana expressed her pride in Emilia's strength. Medical personnel quickly transported the block of ice containing Seraphol to the family hospital while Emilia was taken to the infirmary to rest, accompanied by her mother, who wore a smile that day. An elder from the council announced that Seraphol Citri had been defeated, and the arena erupted in applause for Emilia, celebrating not only her display of power but also her loyalty and love for those she cherished, Issei and her mother, Venelana. In the cold dimension where Issei was battling Azazel, they heard the news of Seraphol's defeat. Issei smiled, while Azazel remained incredulous, unable to comprehend how Seraphol had been defeated. Issei declared that the real heir was Azazel's betrayal, replacing him with someone like Jean. Azazel shouted that the change was for a greater good, insisting that Issei was no longer of use to them. He threatened to find a new bearer for the boosted gear, looking at Issei with disdain. Unbeknownst to Azazel, the audience had heard everything and began to feel a surge of hatred towards him. The council began to murmur among themselves in response to what the cadre had said. Issei expressed his doubts about Azazel, reminding him that the new wielder of the boosted gear had been right in front of him that day and was one of the women in his harem. Azazel thought about all the girls in Agar's entourage until he realized the truth. He was taken aback as Issei revealed that his successor was Zenobia Corda, the new Seekvaira. Issei's anger flared as he warned Azazel not to dare to supplant him and Drake with a mere impostor and a low-tier dragon. Outside the dimension, all eyes turned to Griselda's ward, which did not surprise her. An elder from the council demanded that Zenobia reveal the boosted gear if Issei was telling the truth. Zenobia summoned the boosted gear, and Drake greeted them with a cheerful remark. The council confirmed that the sacred gear was authentic. An elder asked if she could reach the balance breaker. Drake encouraged Zenobia to demonstrate her power. Together, they called upon the boosted gear's balance breaker, and Zenobia manifested the Seekvaira armor. Valis stood up, revealing his Albion wings, confirming that it was indeed the true boosted gear. He accused the Gremory faction, along with the cadres Penemu, Azazel, and the Mao Surzex and Seraphol, of attempting to eliminate the pillar of the alliance. The crowd in the stadium erupted in outrage, with demons and fallen angels shouting insults and urging Issei to fight back. Many were misled by the Mao's Lucifer and Leviathan in their attempts to harm the hero of all factions. In the VIP room, Penemu attempted to escape but was captured by Barakiel, who restrained her with magic. She protested vehemently, but Barakiel coldly warned her that he hoped Azazel would pay for this offense, ensuring that no one from Grigori would come to her aid. Penemu, recalling another cadre who had conspired against Issei, threatened Barakiel, but he dismissed her concerns, stating that her ally was now frozen alongside Kokabeel. She was horrified, their carefully laid plans were in ruins, and there would be no escape for her or the Gremmery. In the pocket dimension, Azazel was furious upon learning about the new wielder of Drake. He raged about capturing Zenobia and Seekvaira, vowing to make them suffer before their demise. As he materialized a war axe imbued with draconian aura, Issei felt a violent surge of power within him. Azazel, in his arrogance, failed to realize the danger of provoking a dragon, especially regarding what was most precious to him. Azazel boasted about his new weapon, the Triax Madness, claiming it contained the soul of one of the evil dragons Issei had defeated. Issei remained silent, but inside, he was consumed with hatred and disgust for Azazel, knowing that the cadre had sealed his own fate with his words. Azazel challenged Issei to elevate the battle, showcasing his monstrous armor. Issei, wielding his sword, declared his own balance breaker, revealing the cold and powerful armor of the three-headed dragon, Trishula. The energy radiating from him was felt throughout the underworld and beyond, reminiscent of the first ice dragon that had appeared in the raiding game against Rias. As the two auras clashed, Azazel felt the chilling dominance of Issei's power, making him uneasy. Issei demanded that Azazel either fight or remain silent. Azazel, frustrated by his inability to land a hit, questioned why Issei wouldn't accept his fate. Issei retorted that he had no obligation to explain himself and taunted Azazel about his lack of strength, pointing out that even with his sacred gear, he was no match for him. In a fit of rage, Azazel unleashed his corrupted sacred aura, combining it with the draconian energy of Azidahaka to create a destructive sphere of power. He proclaimed that he would prove himself worthy of Gabriel when Issei was defeated, blaming Michael for trusting someone he deemed unworthy. Sacred Evil Nova! Azazel shouted as he launched the sphere of energy toward Issei, who watched as the destructive technique sped toward him. The attack from Azazel reverberated throughout the arena, shocking everyone present. No one had anticipated that the former governor of Grigori possessed such immense power and malice. They could hardly believe he had awakened the spirit of a dragon as dangerous and deranged as Azidahaka, an artificial sacred gear. In the VIP room, concern for Issei filled the air, except for Penemu, who wore a malicious smile. Gabriel, on the verge of tears, was particularly distressed. Issei was struck directly by the attack, and Gabriel cried out in despair, her voice filled with anguish. Penemu, relishing the moment, taunted Gabriel, reminding her of the situation with a cruel grin. Michael, furious, intervened, expressing his determination to protect his sister from Penemu's twisted intentions. Penemu, undeterred, continued to revel in her dark predictions, suggesting that Issei was doomed and mocking the situation with maniacal laughter. Suddenly, Shiva shouted, drawing everyone's attention to the icy dimension, and the atmosphere shifted as a new energy began to manifest. The tension in the air was palpable as the music of impending chaos began to play, signaling that the battle was far from over. A voice echoed ominously, sending chills down Azazel's spine. The icy storm began to subside, revealing his potential executioner. Azazel could only ask who this person was. Haido Issei stood before him, a mix of fury, fear, and hatred in his gaze. The three-headed dragon roared, its sound reverberating through the underworld, instilling terror in all who heard it. Azazel watched as the dimension around him began to crumble. The power unleashed was too great for the realm to withstand. Just as the dimension collapsed completely, Azazel and the dragon materialized in the arena of the raiding games. The colossal dragon barely fit in the space, facing a faction that was completely terrified. The dragon's three heads roared in unison, calling out Azazel's name. Panic-stricken, Azazel fled at maximum speed, but one of the dragon's heads caught him effortlessly, biting down on his leg. He cried out in pain. The dragon's voice boomed, demanding to know where he thought he was going, slamming him to the ground and leaving his leg bruised and bloodied. It warned him that he would not escape alive, especially after the lies he had spread about its promised ones and the Alliance. Hearing this, Graphia, Seekvaira, Zenobia, Gabriel, the Gusto sisters, Yasaka, Ariel, Elmenahilde, and Valerie all reacted with a noticeable blush, whispering Issei's name. In the VIP room, the leaders were grateful that the dragon was their ally, while Penemu was horrified by the events unfolding. Back in the arena, Azazel's face was marked with terror as he faced the imposing dragon. He pleaded for mercy, tears streaming down his face, begging Issei to spare him. He offered anything, even promising to make Rias Gremory love him again. Issei shouted that he was already committed, but Azazel smirked, reminding him that Surzex was part of the alliance and would force him to be with Rias and her group. Issei declared that Seekvaira's pawn would finish him off, insisting he would never be bound to Rias Gremory. With that, he crushed Azazel's bionic arm under his massive foot, rendering it to pieces. The dragon then tore away Azazel's injured leg, and the cries of pain echoed as Azazel felt his limb being ripped from him. But this was just the beginning. Issei continued to dismantle Azazel piece by piece, taking his other arm, then his remaining leg and finally his wings, leaving Azazel a sobbing, helpless figure, devoid of limbs and wings, at the mercy of the dragon. All of this was witnessed by the demons and the leaders of the alliance. Without hesitation, the dragon raised its paw and brought it down upon Azazel's head. The impact was devastating, and Azazel's head burst under the weight of Issei's paw. One of the dragon's heads proceeded to consume Azazel's torso. Issei roared in triumph, declaring Azazel dead, while an elder from the council watched in horror. In the arena of the raiding games, the mighty dragon Trishula roared victoriously, captivating the audience with a mix of fascination and fear. The leaders and the demonic council were both impressed and awed by the creature, fully aware that confronting it would lead to their demise, just like Azazel's. Penemu wept for the loss of one of her leaders. Gabriel calmly remarked on Azazel's defeat, while Elmenahilde noted that Issei would seek power to protect those he cared for. Yasaka pointed out that both she and the Gremory clan had lost their rights and benefits. Penemu felt her pride wounded, realizing that Emilia, once considered a pariah, had defeated Serafal Citri. Kunu celebrated Issei's victory, expressing her desire to train under him to become a worthy daughter. Meanwhile, Penemu could only lament her poor decisions, never expecting that Issei Hyudo, whom she viewed as a pervert and useless, would gain such power to protect the women loyal to him. In the arena, Trishula ceased its roaring, its colossal form beginning to shrink until it revealed Issei Hyudo, panting from exhaustion. He remarked on how tiring the battle had been when a group of women, including Zenobia, Seekvaira, Rainier, Ophis, the Gusto sisters and Ariel, flew toward him. They tackled him in a flurry of affection, showering him with kisses, and Issei felt incredibly fortunate for their love. The audience watched with approval, and soon the demonic council began to applaud, followed by the VIP room, except for Penemu, who remained silent. Kunu cheered, while Yasaka, Elmenahilde and Valerie clapped, though jealousy simmered within them as they watched other girls surround Issei. The stadium erupted in applause and cheers. They hailed him as their hero, celebrating Issei's triumph over Azazel. Issei reminded everyone that they could not celebrate just yet, as there was still someone who needed to settle a score with a certain Siscon. Seekvaira agreed, noting that he had waited long enough for this moment. In the stands, Grafia accompanied her beloved to keep an eye on Emilia, who had awakened in the infirmary. The three women watched the massacre Issei had unleashed on Azazel and the scene of Seekvaira and the other girls embracing and kissing him. Emilia was taken aback when her mother revealed that she was in a relationship with Grafia. She accepted their relationship, noting that it was a stark contrast to the toxic dynamics she had witnessed with her brother and father, recognizing that they were truly happy together. When would they get married? Grafia smiled at her stepdaughter, soon-to-be sister in the harem, and replied that they were still waiting for someone very important to answer a sincere question. Venelana interjected, saying they would discuss it after the final duel between Surzex and Seekvaira-san's pawn, but she was curious about who it was. Emilia adjusted her robe and offered a hint for Grafia, mentioning that it was someone who had been absent from their lives for a long time. Grafia reflected on many things until the image of a red-haired boy came to her mind, and she couldn't hold back her tears. She expressed her sorrow, stating that he was dead and that his death had been the reason for her divorce from Surzex. Emilia smiled and reassured her that he was never truly dead, He had only grown stronger with the goal of reuniting with her. Grafia smiled through her tears, realizing who it was and that he was facing her ex-husband. In a pocket dimension, Surzex was attacking the hooded pawn, who effortlessly dodged the Mao's strikes. Frustrated, Surzex shouted about the pawn's evasiveness and demanded a response. Suddenly, the declaration from the elder of the council echoed through the air. Azazel was dead. Surzex was shocked, unable to believe that his ally had been killed by Hayudo Issei. In a fit of rage, he turned to the pawn, vowing that he would pay for Azazel's death and Seraphal's defeat. The pawn calmly replied that he would be the one to end Surzex. The Mao found the pawn's voice familiar and began to feel uneasy. He demanded to know the pawn's identity, but the pawn responded with sarcasm, reminding him of a mission Surzex had sent him on to retrieve a precious object in Iceland, which had been a ruse to eliminate him. The pawn revealed that the true intention was to prevent him from interfering with Surzex, his aunt, and her ungrateful entourage, who would soon be spending the night in a hospital. Outside the dimension, the crowd reacted angrily to the pawn's words, directing their frustration at the red-haired Mao. The Demon Council had moved to the VIP room to discuss the situation, with Penemu still restrained by magic. The elders shouted at Ajuka, questioning if they were complicit in getting rid of the hero who had saved their lives. Ajuka denied it, while another elder demanded to know the whereabouts of Falbium. Ajuka explained that he was working on something and would have all the answers soon. Odin pointed out that Falbium had voted to eliminate Issei, but Ajuka clarified that he had never agreed with Surzex or Seraphal. He revealed that Falbium had acted as a double agent, gathering information about the sinister plan against Hayudo Issei and Emilia Bale. Penemu was in shock, realizing that Falbium was the informant responsible for the failure of the assassination plot against Issei a year ago. She angrily accused him, but was silenced by Kunu, who kicked her in the face. Yasaka praised Kunu for her actions, leaving Penemu humiliated. Back in the pocket dimension, Surzex processed the pawn's words and was horrified to realize who he was. He shouted in disbelief, claiming that the pawn was dead. The pawn removed his hood, revealing himself as Milica's, wearing a malicious smile. In the arena, everyone was stunned by the identity of Seekvaira Agar's pawn. Some demons shouted that it was Milica's Gremory, while others expressed disbelief that he was supposed to be dead. Confusion reigned in the stands, but certain individuals, including Noelia, Souza, the Phoenix clan, except Ravel, Citri, except Seraphal, the Bale clan, Seekvaira Agars and her entourage, along with Venelana, Grafia, and Emilia, shared a common thought: Surzex was a dead man. In the VIP room, the Demon Council listened to Milica's and made a decision. If Milica's lost, Surzex would be removed from his position as Mao, along with Seraphal, and neither would hold any significant role in the underworld or the Alliance again. The leaders agreed. Penemu, frustrated and defeated, protested, but Barakiel silenced her, declaring that she had no voice or vote within the Alliance or Grigori anymore. In the infirmary, Grafia cried tears of joy upon learning that her son was alive. She called out for Milica's excitedly as she watched him on the television. Venelana embraced her from behind, asking if she was happy. Emilia watched with delight as her mother and ex-sister-in-law shared a moment of love. Grafia took a deep breath, ready to say something to one of the two most important men in her life. With determination, she shouted for Milica's to give it his all, leaving Venelana and Emilia in shock. Emilia asked her mother who the other person was. Venelana winked and replied that Emilia already knew the answer, mentioning that the man was the reason she and Grafia would consider becoming bisexual. Emilia was taken aback, realizing it was Issei. Back in the dimension, Surzex confronted his newly identified son. He expressed disbelief at how Milica's had survived and declared that he would ensure Milica's would not live through the day. Surzex, channeling the power of destruction, lamented that had he known about the betrayal against him and the Gremory clan, he would have dealt with Milica's immediately. Milica's watched with indifference and pulled out a knife from a small sheath at his side. The knife bore a mirror-like design similar to Issei's sword and Emilia's staff. He called upon his sacred gear, the Nekroz knife, and as he did, his weapon transformed, enveloped in a feather-like aura. Milikas donned an emerald-green feathered armor that resembled a fearsome bird. He activated his balance breaker, the Necros of Clausulus, showcasing his armor that radiated power rivaling that of a Mao. In the stands, Souza and Noelia were taken aback by Milikas's transformation. Noelia noted that Clausulus had chosen Milikas as its wielder. Ubaluna was confused by the mention of Clausulus, prompting Comgusto to explain that Clausulus was a unique bird in their world, with feathers sharp enough to pierce platinum and titanium and claws capable of crushing gold and diamonds effortlessly. He added that its most important ability was devastating to opponents. Back in the dimension, both father and son glared at each other with animosity. Surzex shouted in fury, raising his hand to unleash his destructive power. However, in a flash, Milikas was upon him, delivering a powerful kick to Surzex's jaw, leaving a mark from the claws of his armor. Milikas followed up with a flurry of attacks, cornering Surzex against a wall. He momentarily stepped back to prepare a magical attack. Milikas unleashed the technique of Necros. A barrage of jade feathers shot forth like sharp arrows, striking Surzex and embedding themselves into his body, leaving only his head unscathed. After the assault, Surzex resembled a voodoo doll, with feathers protruding from his back, neck, abdomen, chest, and legs. He declared that if Milikas wanted to kill him, he was far from succeeding. Surzex unleashed his power, expelling the feathers from his body, and began to gather energy in his hands, forming a sphere of destructive power that grew larger with each passing moment. He shouted that Milikas had the chance to end him, but now it was his turn, threatening to kill Grafia and Emilia once he escaped. With a fierce shout, Surzex released the sphere of power, creating a force field that expanded rapidly until it reached Milikas. The resulting explosion shook the arena, horrifying the spectators as they witnessed Surzex's willingness to sacrifice his family for his goals. The older demons cried out in outrage, while younger demons wept for Milikas's impending doom. In the infirmary, Grafia was horrified and in tears, witnessing her son being struck by her ex-husband's technique. She screamed in anger, vowing to avenge her child, while Venelana and several nurses held her back as she struggled to break free. In the VIP room, the leaders were appalled by Surzex's actions against Milikas, but Penemu simply smiled with satisfaction. Back in the arena, Surzex, exhausted and dazed, wore a sinister smile. He taunted Milikas for his foolishness, claiming he was unworthy of the Gremory name. As he prepared to leave the dimension, the sound of powerful wings flapping caught his attention. He searched for the source of the noise until a flash of light revealed a silhouette of a bird, gradually increasing in size, resembling the feathered armor worn by his son. The enormous bird let out a cry reminiscent of an eagle as it dove down, preparing its massive claws to capture Surzex. The red-haired warrior was readying an attack fueled by the power of destruction, but he felt his strength waning. Suddenly, he cried out in alarm as the sharp, destructive claws of the colossal bird pierced his arms. He was bewildered, questioning why he couldn't unleash his attacks, feeling the weight of his diminishing power. The bird responded, and Surzex recognized the voice. It was Milikas. The monstrous creature explained that the jade feathers he had sent earlier were imbued with special magic and a trace of his blood. When they pierced Surzex's body, they began to drain his magical strength, leaving him nearly powerless. This was why his devastating attack had little effect on Milikas. In desperation, Surzex pleaded for mercy, suggesting they could return to being the happy family they once were, alongside Grafia, Issei, and the others, as if nothing had happened. Tears filled his eyes as he spoke, but the bird regarded him with a cold, predatory gaze. Surzex thought he had convinced Milikas, but then, with a swift motion, Milikas struck, piercing Surzex's heart with one of his sharp claws. The bird declared it was too late for forgiveness and opened its beak to unleash a devastating attack. In an instant, the scene shifted to a distorted dimension, revealing a wounded Surzex, who screamed in pain. He was left without arms or legs, his chest riddled with wounds, and his face disfigured. The bird's feathers were soaked in his blood. The demonic council announced Surzex Gremory's defeat, proclaiming Issei Hayu, Emilia Bale, and Milika's lucifuge as the victors. Following Surzex's crushing defeat, Issei, along with Emilia and Milika's, requested a meeting with the leaders of the alliance to discuss a new peace agreement and an alliance with the dual-terminal world in 10 days. The council consented, not wanting to make enemies of Agarz's followers after witnessing their overwhelming power. The next day, significant changes occurred within the demonic faction and Grigori. Serorg Bale and Roygun Belphegor were promoted to Maus, with Serorg taking over his infamous cousin's position and Roygun assuming the role of the new Mao Leviathan. They were trusted to lead the underworld alongside Ajuka and Falbium. In Grigori, due to the crimes committed by Shemhazai and Azizel against the pillars of the factions, Penemu was demoted to a low-ranking fallen angel for her complicity. Her wings were clipped, and much of her power was stripped away as a precaution against potential rebellion. The new leader would be Barakiel, with Armoros as his right-hand man and Ananiel taking over Penemu's position. Meanwhile, the Agar's clan received numerous alliance requests from existing pillars of the underworld and families from other factions, including offers of loyalty and service from various Yukai and Asgardians. This was all thanks to the overwhelming victory achieved by their daughter and her team in the raiding game. On the other hand, the Gremory mansion lay nearly abandoned. The maids and butlers had left, and other families like the Citri, the Phoenix, Glaciolabelas, and the Agars had hired them. The Gremory family had fallen to the lowest point, their name now synonymous with scorn, betrayal, and ingratitude. This was a result of Rias, her team, and Surzex's decisions, which left them in a lamentable physical, emotional, and social state. They had never realized the weight of Issei Hayadu's name in the underworld and the consequences of their attempts to replace and eliminate him. After 2 days following the raiding game, Rias, her team, and allies remained unconscious due to the severity of their injuries. Serafal underwent surgery to repair her back, but the damage to her spinal cord was critical, leaving her paralyzed and emotionally devastated. Her family would support her with physical and emotional therapy, providing her with a remote-controlled wheelchair. However, now that she was no longer a Mao, she would be under the care of her parents to prevent any rash actions against Issei and Emilia, as she still harbored resentment toward Rias's younger sister. In a large cubicle, the Gremory family rested. Rias was the first to awaken, her right arm and left leg in casts. Serorg, looking at her sternly, informed her that she had been unconscious for 2 days. He noted that Emilia had shown restraint in her attack, or else Rias would have been in much worse condition. Rias, irritated by the reminder of her humiliation, asked Serorg why he was there. He handed her an envelope signed by Serorg Lucifer, revealing that she needed to attend a meeting of the Alliance with her entire team. Rias was shocked to learn that Serorg had taken the title of Mao Lucifer, as both Surzex and Serafal had been removed from their positions due to their actions. Roygun, the ancient heiress of the Belphegor clan, declared herself the new Mao Leviathan, leaving Rias horrified as she learned that her allies had been stripped of their high positions. She revealed that Shemhazai was now frozen in the Cocytus, Penemu had become a low-ranking angel, and Azazel was dead. Rias struggled to believe the words of the new Mao Leviathan, insisting that Azazel could not be dead. Her exasperation grew as she shouted that it was a lie. Serorg, stepping forward, presented a DVD, stating that it contained the recorded raiding game against Seekvaira Agars. He indicated that he would show it to her since her team was waking up. Rias noticed her group stirring, some in pain and others emotionally shaken as they recalled their humiliating defeat in front of the entire underworld. Serorg taunted them, questioning how well they had slept, which struck a blow to their pride. As Serorg noted that everyone was awake, Asia interrupted, searching for her fiancé. Irina joined in, calling out for her beloved. Kaneko, too, was on the hunt for Jean, sniffing the air for any trace of him. Serorg and Roygun exchanged exasperated glances. Roygun decided to spare them the details, revealing that Jean Nibirius, the usurper of Alliance's pillar and bearer of the dragon doppelganger, had fallen to Hayudo Issei, the wielder of the ice barrier dragons. A satisfied smile crossed her face as she delivered the news. The Gremory family and their allies were unable to contain their tears upon hearing this, some expressing skepticism and anger. Kuroka vehemently denied Roigun's claim, insisting that Jean was much stronger than Issei. Akino, looking to Rias for confirmation, found her friend bowed in sorrow, tears streaming down her face as she recalled witnessing Jean's demise. Akino pleaded with Rias to deny the truth. Serorg proceeded to play the DVD, fast-forwarding to the moment when Rosweiss was eliminated and the scene where Jean activated the Juggernaut drive. Rosweiss shouted confidently that Issei could not have defeated Jean in such a manner, but her certainty was shattered when the crimson-haired figure transformed into the dangerous Bryanak and proceeded to overpower Jean, devouring him. Rosweiss was horrified, unable to comprehend how Issei could have killed Jean without hesitation. In a desolate, snow-covered landscape, a girl could be heard running, panting heavily in terror and desperation. She called out for her friends Akino, Asia, Irina, and Kuroka while shedding a hat that revealed her crimson hair. It was Rias Gremory, desperately searching for her team in the frozen wasteland. But suddenly, something changed. The footsteps of a creature echoed in the desolate landscape. Rias was filled with panic as she ran for her life, a fierce snowstorm beginning to sweep across the icy blue desert around her. Exhaustion was taking its toll, and just when she thought she couldn't run any longer, she stumbled. She cried out in shock as she tripped over something. As she looked to see what had caused her fall, a horrifying sight met her eyes. Akino lay lifeless before her, her gaze empty and devoid of light. Rias screamed in despair, calling out for her fallen friend. But as her surroundings came into focus, more bodies began to emerge from the snow, each revelation deepening Rias's horror. She recognized the lifeless forms of Asia, Rosweiss, Serafal, Penemu, Kaneko, Kuroka, Irina, Kiba, Gasper, Surzex, and Azazel. Rias's heart sank as she cried out, pleading for her friends not to abandon her. Before she could mourn further, 3 colossal silhouettes surrounded her. The bodies of her comrades began to glow ominously, and the figures roared with fury, preparing to unleash their freezing powers upon Rias. She recognized 2 of the massive shapes. One resembled a gigantic serpent, while the other was a 3-headed creature. The third silhouette, a quadrupedal beast, filled her with dread. As the 3 colossal figures unleashed their powers, Rias felt helpless and instinctively covered herself with her arms, bracing for the inevitable. Suddenly, she awoke with a start, drenched in sweat and wearing a white nightgown. Akino rushed into the room, her dark hair flowing behind her, concern etched on her face. She urged Rias to calm down. Rias confessed that she had experienced the nightmare again, clinging to Akino and beginning to cry. Akino gently reminded her that it had been 3 weeks since the dreams began, trying to soothe her friend's pain. Rias lamented that if it hadn't been for her plan to betray Issei, none of this would have happened. Akino shared in her sorrow, acknowledging that they had made a terrible decision that had led to their exclusion from the alliance. Rias expressed her anguish over being disowned by her mother and the rejection from Milikas, blaming her younger sister for their misfortunes. Akino noted that it had been 10 years since Issei and Emilia left with the Citri clan, Vale, Bovatanin, and the Agars clan. They hadn't heard from them since that fateful day. Rias reflected on how her mother and Grafia had become Issei's partners, still struggling to accept the reality of their relationship. Akino suggested that Rias should rest, as it was only 2 a.m. and they needed to prepare for work. After Akino left the room, Rias attempted to drift back to sleep. In her thoughts, Rias recalled the decade that had passed since Issei departed with her sister and the other girls to the world of Dual Terminal. The changes in the alliance had been drastic, particularly affecting her clan, which had been excluded from any missions. Ajuka Beelzebub now led the underworld, supported by Falbium, her cousin Serorg Lucifer, and Roigun Leviathan. In Grigori, Barakiel had become the new leader of the fallen angels, while Penemu remained a low-ranking angel, her pride repeatedly trampled by Grigori. Eventually, she could no longer endure the humiliation and attempted to confront Ananiel, who had taken her place. This act led to her swift exile, and now she lived with Rias's clan in the Gremory mansion. In the heavens, the former Ace of Hearts, Mirana, had been promoted to Seraph and supported Michael, as Gabriel had left with Issei. In Kyoto, the new leader was the Nikomata Magari, a friend of Kuroka and Kaneko. Upon taking charge of the Yukai, she immediately prohibited Rias's clan from entering their territory due to the resentment stemming from events a decade prior. Kaneko and Kuroka were given an ultimatum: stepping onto Yukai land would mean signing their own death warrants, as they were seen as a disgrace to their kind. In Asgard, things remained normal, but like in Kyoto, Rias's clan was also barred from entry. Rosweiss faced a similar fate, as Odin had exiled her with the consent of her grandmother and the Valkyrie leader, Brunhild, due to the disgrace she had brought upon the Valkyries. Meanwhile, Rias's clan had completed their studies and now worked miserable part-time jobs, dedicating themselves to hunting low-level renegade demons. The Baal and Phoenix clans took care of the more powerful demons, leaving Rias's group to pick up the scraps, with their pay being a mere pittance. The only one who had distanced herself from Rias's clan was Seraphal, who confronted Rias during a meeting, blaming her for leaving her paralyzed and declaring that her life had become a living hell since then. But the deepest wound for Rias was the death of her brother, Surzex Gremry. One day his body, already damaged from Milika's attack, could no longer withstand the strain, and his heart succumbed to a fatal attack. I swear that as soon as I see Milika's, I will reprimand him for having killed his honorable father. It has been 10 difficult years for me, for my entourage, and for my allies. I have worked against the current, but when we see Issei, we will recover him and make amends in ways you can't imagine. We will snatch him from those wretched girls of the dual terminal, from the claws of Seekvaira Agars, from Sona Citri, but above all, from that woman I once called mother, Venelana Bil. End POV Rias Gremry. Dual terminal world. In the picturesque village where its inhabitants lived, peace reigned unyieldingly. On the outskirts of this village stood a large house, not quite a mansion, with a rustic appearance surrounded by fields of crops. This was the home of the Hyudo family, led by the patriarchs Miki and Gur Hyudo, great warriors belonging to the X tribe. Alongside them was their son Issei Hyudo, the current leader of the Necros tribe. It is worth mentioning that Issei had married in the lands of Dual Terminal to the girls of his current harem, each representing different factions from their world, with the alpha female being Seekvaira Agars. When not with her husband, Seekvaira spent her time in a workshop creating machines and mechs. Other girls, such as Sona Citri, Emilia Bale, Zenobia Corda, and the Gishki sisters, Ariel and Gusto, dedicated themselves to training. Notably, Zenobia and Seekvaira had received training in the lands of Dual Terminal, significantly increasing their power. Other girls like Peri, Venelana, Gabriel, Graphia, and Rainier focused on agriculture and expressed their liberation from the administrative tasks they routinely performed in the underworld. It should be noted that the Asgardian Peri and Rainier were expecting Issei's children. Ophis, on her part, wandered through the Dual Terminal world, often returning with torn clothing and minor injuries from battles with creatures in hostile areas. She viewed these encounters as training to grow stronger. The Sona clan had moved in with the Gem Knights, and aside from Ruruko and Saji, who were a couple, they had found true love among the Gem Knights, especially Tsubaki, who found a better partner than her ex, Kiba Yudo. With Vale, Lavinia, and Bova Tannen, they embarked on a training journey, determined to grow stronger, and had yet to find the will to return to their friends, though they kept in touch to avoid worrying them. Both Issei and the Citri girls had managed to have children. Everything was going smoothly until one day. Issei was enjoying a peaceful day in the countryside where he lived. He found it comfortable as he leaned against a tree, reflecting on how beneficial the peaceful days had been. As he began to close his eyes to take a short nap, a voice called out to him. Emilia approached, and as Issei sat up, he saw one of his wives accompanied by a small figure. A red-haired girl of 9 years old ran towards him, shouting, "Dad!" Issei lifted his daughter, Pavlova, into his arms. Emilia spoke seriously, informing Issei that Noelia was urgently requesting their presence at their home. Issei nodded and quickly, with Emilia and Pavlova, they made their way to their house where Noelia Gishki, along with Souza, was already waiting, accompanied by their parents and Seekvaira, who was holding a baby in her arms. Noelia greeted Issei kindly, while Souza offered a friendly hello. Mickey and Goru smiled and greeted him, and Seekvaira expressed her happiness to see him. Pavlova dashed towards her grandparents, wrapping her arms around them. Noelia shifted the conversation to a serious note, capturing Issei's attention. She asked if he remembered who the first invaders of their world were. Issei and Emilia thought back until Issei recalled, "The worms?" Souza confirmed this, revealing that the worms had returned to the old world, shocking the Hyudo family. Emilia expressed disbelief, stating that they were supposed to have been extinct for millennia. Souza explained that they were indeed not extinct and presented a folder he had brought. Ajuka had sent files through the interdimensional magic circle, and as Issei, Emilia, and Seekvaira looked at the table, they saw photos of various space creatures. According to Ajuka, they had arrived no more than 2 months ago when a meteorite fell on the island of Tanzania. Noelia expressed her concern about the creatures that had spread like a plague, having exterminated the entire population of Tanzania before moving on to Asia and parts of Europe. The Olympians and vampires had tried to stop them but were overwhelmed by their numbers. Souza added that fortunately, the other factions had come to their rescue. Seekvaira, while passing her baby to her mother-in-law, who began to coo at the child, voiced her worry about the old world being in danger. She noted that the factions were at risk. Noelia confirmed this, stating it was time for them to return to the old world. She insisted that all of Seekvaira's wives and the Citri clan must come back, especially since Seekvaira's parents and Sona Citri's parents would want to meet their grandchildren. At this, Seekvaira blushed with happiness as she looked at her baby in Mickey Hyudo's arms. Issei declared that there would be no more discussion on the matter and that it was time to return to their old home, announcing their departure to Kuo the next day. Everyone in the Hyudo residence nodded in agreement. It was time for the members of the dual terminal and the factions to return to action. In the United Nations headquarters, Ajuka narrated the aftermath of the massacre on the island of Tanzania caused by the creatures that emerged from the meteorite that struck Mount Kilimanjaro. He began to investigate these beings, recalling that Noelia and Souza had referred to them as the worms. With some of the literature they had given him a decade ago, he realized they were discussing highly dangerous creatures composed of light, similar to sacred energy. Ajuka was astounded that these abominations were made of energy akin to that of angels. During a rescue mission in Istanbul, Turkey, he witnessed these creatures overpower a small squad of demons. Each swipe, bite, or luminous substance they emitted was described by a dying soldier as feeling like a lance of light from angels and fallen beings. The attacks from these creatures had affected both the human and supernatural worlds, with mythologies and factions suffering assaults from the worms. The human world experienced significant carnage in its most populated cities. Recognizing the grave risk both worlds faced, Ajuka gathered the leaders of the alliance to discuss revealing the supernatural world, arguing that cooperation was essential to combat the worms. The alliance approved this idea, and it was time to reveal themselves to humanity. When they requested a meeting at the United Nations and disclosed their secret, the initial distrust was palpable. However, after explaining their common enemy, they proposed a non-aggression pact, demonstrating that they would not abuse the trust humanity had placed in them to cooperate against the worms. Now, Ajuka stood with the leaders of the Supernatural Alliance before the leaders of humanity, strategizing on how to regain ground against the ruthless alien invaders. Ajuka, along with Surorg, Barakil, Michael, Krull Teeps, Magari, Odin, Ra, Zeus, and Shiva, were gathered with representatives from the UN, still discussing the worms. The UN president reported that attacks had been detected in Mongolia, Hong Kong, Nepal, and Sri Lanka, showing distressing images of the worms attacking innocent people and supernatural soldiers falling in battle. The creatures were gaining ground. Krull Teeps lamented that her race had nearly faced extinction, as Romania was left in a dire state after the worms' attack, leaving humans and vampires in poverty and crisis. The Carmilla clan was officially extinct. Zeus shared his sorrow over an attack in Greece and parts of Italy, where his faction had barely survived. He revealed that his wife Hera, along with Ares, Athena, and the demigods, had perished in an attack by a particularly powerful worm. Odin expressed surprise that Hades had chosen to cooperate with them. The UN president noted that neither the human race nor the supernatural beings had been able to halt the advance of these creatures, as neither their weapons nor those of the supernatural had proven effective. Magari pointed out that whenever a part of a worm was cut or mutilated, it regenerated instantly. Michael remarked on the surprising fact that these creatures emitted a power similar to their own and that of their former Grigori brethren. Serorg noted that 2 months had passed without any useful information to counter their common enemy. Shiva, the god of destruction, reluctantly admitted that it had taken considerable effort to eliminate a few, expending much energy in the process. The atmosphere in the room grew heavy with resignation as the UN president acknowledged the grim reality that both worlds were facing potential extinction at the hands of extraterrestrial invaders. Suddenly, a communication circle formed in Ajuka's ear. He listened intently, his expression turning serious as he reacted to the news. An alarm sounded in the UN headquarters, and commanders rushed in to report another attack by the worms. The president inquired about the location, but Ajuka interjected, stating that the worms were attacking Kuo, Japan. This revelation shocked the leaders of the supernatural factions and the representative from Japan, as the region was under the protection of Razor Phoenix and his entourage, along with Misla Bale, who currently held the power of her son's faction while in Kuo. With urgency, the leaders prepared to respond to the crisis. Mal Beelzebub needed to go immediately to Kuo to support the Phoenix and Bale families. The Japanese army was preparing to repel the worms invading Kuo, and they would have the necessary support for the defense and evacuation of the city. The meeting had concluded, and the leaders of the supernatural factions departed in a magical circle towards Kuo, while the United Nations prepared for another battle against the invading aliens. In Japan, in the city of Kuo, chaos reigned. The streets were marked by the aftermath of the worms' attack, with the remnants of innocent victims scattered about. The horrifying sight of the invaders consuming human and supernatural flesh filled the streets of the Japanese city. Human and supernatural soldiers united to stop the invaders, but their efforts were minimal. The leaders of the supernatural factions fought valiantly, yet they could only defeat a small number of worms compared to the massive army that was forming. The focus shifted to Kuo Academy, where students took refuge in classrooms while Razor Phoenix and Serorg, led by their mother, Miss LaBelle, defended the integrity of the school. Razor, exhausted, urged his allies to keep attacking as he struggled to incinerate a worm that quickly regenerated. Frustration filled him as he realized the invaders seemed invincible. One of the pawns, Ubaluna's protector, informed Razor that Ubaluna was safe in the classrooms with the other students. Razor, mentally fatigued, lamented that this couldn't have come at a worse time, especially with Ubaluna Piargnanti. Suddenly, a magical circle appeared, revealing figures the Alliance did not wish to see. Razor was taken aback to see his ex-fiancée, Gremory, who looked at him with a sense of superiority. They had come to support him, Aquino stated confidently, while Kiba declared they would eliminate the aliens in the name of the proud Gremory house. Razor was on the verge of exploding at their arrival but decided to keep his composure, instructing them not to get in the way. He turned his back on the Gremory, especially his sister, which caused him pain as he still hadn't forgiven her. He rallied his team to continue defending the academy. Meanwhile, Rias Gremory and her allies strategized, knowing they had to exterminate the worms to gain the trust of the Alliance leaders and, hopefully, win back Issei's attention. They were determined to make him fall in love with them again and bring him back to the clan he had left. However, the situation was deteriorating for the defenders of Kuo. The worms were gaining ground rapidly, and both human and supernatural soldiers were falling to the invaders. The Bale and Phoenix clans were suffering casualties, and the Gremory faced even worse conditions, lacking medical support from the Alliance. Rias demanded that Razor tell his pawn to heal her pieces, but he coldly dismissed her concerns, expressing indifference to their fate. Rias was exasperated, unable to comprehend how he could be so heartless. Razor accused her of betrayal, reminding her of her choice to be with Jean instead of Issei. His words struck a nerve, and Rias struggled to respond, recalling the plan they had made a decade ago. Suddenly, a scream echoed through the academy. Razor recognized it immediately. Ubaluna was in danger, defending the students from a massive worm that threatened her life. Despite her injuries, Carmine urged Razor to go to Ubeluna, while Meru, one of Razor's pawns, warned Rias not to interfere. Rias, furious, retaliated with her own threats, but the tension escalated. Isabella rallied the remaining fighters, urging them to hold out until Razor could return with Ubeluna. The Phoenix girls created a defensive barrier to protect the students, while Rias watched, feeling helpless. Razor sprinted towards the academy but was met with a terrifying sight. The worm had shattered the classroom windows, and the terrified screams of the students filled the air. Razor could no longer hold back his fury and unleashed a fireball that halted the worm's advance. As the creature turned its attention to him, Razor bravely called out, challenging it to come after him, ready to sacrifice himself for Ubeluna and the students. He closed his eyes, accepting his imminent fate in the face of the terror surrounding him. Razor's followers cried out in desperation, while the students shouted his name in panic. Ubeluna, filled with horror and tears, watched as her husband prepared to sacrifice himself for her and the students. Razor reflected on cherished memories, recalling moments spent with Issei, who had opened his eyes just in time. Everyone began to feel an overwhelming power, as the pressure from the arena forced nearly all of them to their knees, some even lying flat on the ground. Even Ophis, Lilith, and Gran Rojo struggled against it. A chilling, eerie cold enveloped them all. Ophis resisted the pressure, questioning the source of this power. Lilith expressed her fear, trembling nervously. Sona noted that this power was 10 times more crushing than when they faced the Trihexa. Zenobia shivered, feeling an intense cold. Drake admitted that after all these years he was finally experiencing true fear, recognizing that this power easily surpassed the 3 dragon gods and the 2 dragons who had revealed themselves that day. Yet Gran Rojo, along with Noelia and Souza, who also felt the pressure, merely smiled. Noelia remarked that someone had returned, while Souza commented on the demise of a certain crow, feeling a hint of pity with sarcasm. Seekvaira, confused, inquired about who had come back. Gran Rojo revealed the name, Trishula. A moment earlier, in the pocket dimension. Azazel laughed maniacally, reveling in the belief that it was Issei's destiny to die. He eagerly anticipated claiming his prize, the purity of Seekvaira, Zenobia, and Gabriel. However, he was abruptly silenced by the same power that others felt in the underworld. A chilling wind swept through the dimension, and a snowstorm began to rage. As monstrous footsteps echoed, they shook not only the pocket dimension but also the territory of Agars. With a loud crash, Razor opened his eyes to see the worm had fallen, leaving him astonished. The Phoenix entourage, Gremory, Baal, the Japanese soldiers, and the leaders of the supernatural all turned their attention skyward, sensing something unusual falling from above on this summer day. Snow began to fall more heavily. Razor, bewildered, questioned the source of this power. The supernatural beings felt an unusual and potent force, which seemed to capture the attention of the worms, who also searched for the origin of this power. As the snow continued to fall, Razor noted that the worm he faced struggled against the pressure but could not escape. Rias, observing the snow, tried to identify the user of this magic when a silhouette of a rebellious red-haired woman formed in her mind. She gasped, realizing who was responsible. "Nothing is impossible, Gremory," a voice declared, igniting fury among Rias's allies. The red-haired woman appeared, wearing a familiar outfit. She was the one who had left Seraphal paralyzed and had humiliated Rias and her companions. Razor shouted Amelia's name upon seeing her on the roof. Another voice announced that she was not alone, and suddenly, others began to appear. Razor's pawn, Mira, recognized the now teenaged Milika's Lucifuge. Ubeluna acknowledged Sona Citri through a hologram, while Rias noted the presence of Seekvaira Agars, who regarded her with indifference. Irina recognized Zenobia Corda, who had transformed into a stunning figure. Finally, they saw the one they had been waiting for. A red-haired figure, clad in the armor of Bryanek, smiled at them. Everyone from the supernatural realm joyfully called out to Issei, the bearer of the dragons. However, they were surprised to see children behind him. It was time to fight, Issei declared, rallying everyone. Yes, they all responded, as Emilia, Seekvaira, Sona, Zenobia, Milikas, and the children leaped from the roof, ready to battle the worms and save the world, starting with Kuro. To be continued. The supernatural beings fighting against the relentless worms were astonished to see Issei Hyudo, accompanied by Seekvaira Agars, Sona Citri, Emilia Bale, and Zenobia Quarta, come to their rescue. They felt a mix of relief and joy that the bearers of the ancestral dragon gods had arrived, but concern lingered as the worms had proven to be formidable foes, even for Gran Rojo and Shiva, who had struggled to defeat a few. As they soared through the air, Issei commanded the humans and supernatural beings to retreat. Instantly, demons, angels, fallen ones, and human soldiers began to withdraw, leaving the worms fixated on Issei and his companions. The Baal and Phoenix clans rejoiced at the sight of their hero and friend, along with his fiancées, while the Gremory clan experienced a whirlwind of emotions, joy and hope at seeing Issei again, mixed with anger and a desire for vengeance upon seeing the women accompanying him, especially Emilia. Zenobia shouted with excitement, ready for battle. The red dragon within her bracelet responded enthusiastically, affirming their readiness. As she activated her balance breaker, her armor transformed into that of the Red Emperor Dragon, radiating power. Seekvaira was not to be left behind. She activated her device with a shout, and her attire morphed into a sleek metallic armor. The armor glowed orange in parts, and she drew a katana that emanated heat, giving her a formidable presence. Issei, Emilia, and Milikas joined in, each activating their own balance breakers, revealing the armors of the beasts from the dual terminal. Meanwhile, Sona surrounded herself with water and snow, forming an ice sphere that began to crack, transforming her appearance dramatically. Everyone watched in awe as Issei, Milikas, Emilia, Sona, Seekvaira, and Zenobia unveiled their powers, exuding a powerful yet gentle aura. The boys in the nearby building, who were with the brown-haired protagonist and his wives, were about to be surprised. Zen, the excited blue-haired boy, looked at Pavlova and rallied his friends. Pavlova, Issei and Emilia's daughter, nodded in agreement. Roy, the red-haired boy, expressed his nervousness to Xia, who calmed down with a nod. The four boys conjured magical circles in front of them, and with a unified shout, summoned 4 small dragons that appeared before them, each one buzzing with energy. The little dragons flew around the boys, their excitement palpable. With a shout of Union Dragunity, the boys watched as their dragons began to glow. The reptiles grew in size, and the boys donned armors resembling those of winged beasts. The armors of Pavlova and Victoria, as well as those of Zen and Roy, transformed them into fearsome warriors. As the dragons grew larger and more intimidating, the boys mounted their dragons and charged into battle, shouting their battle cry. The dragons roared in response, joining Issei and his wives in the fray. The worms, initially focused on the supernatural beings and human soldiers, turned their attention to the newcomers, an opportunity that Razor seized. He commanded a retreat, and demons, angels, fallen beings, students, and soldiers obeyed, moving to assist the injured while the horde of worms bypassed them. Razor and Misla Bale helped Apiarjan and Ubaluna find shelter in the academy buildings, eager to witness the clash between the dual-terminal newcomers and the aliens. They observed a different scene unfolding. The newcomers were gaining the upper hand. Issei, Milikas, and Emilia were freezing the worms, with Milikas attacking fiercely. Issei addressed Emilia, who smiled and nodded as they faced the worms together. The sight of their teamwork ignited anger in Rias and her entourage. With a powerful technique, Issei and Emilia unleashed a freezing breath that immobilized the worms, leaving them as solid blocks of ice. However, another worm approached from behind them, unnoticed until it was too late. A dragon, moving at incredible speed, pierced the chest of the massive worm that threatened Issei and Emilia, taking it down instantly. A voice rang out from atop the dragon, revealing a red-haired rider who greeted them with a wave. Emilia returned the gesture, and everyone was astonished to see the daughter of Issei and Emilia. Milikas, filled with determination, declared he would not be left behind, eager to impress his father. He unleashed a flurry of emerald feathers that struck the approaching worms, weakening them significantly. With a shout, Milikas engaged the weakened and frozen worms, using his blade to eliminate them with precision. Meanwhile, Sona faced an army of worms alone. The creatures, hungry and aggressive, charged at her, but she remained calm, reciting a spell that summoned a blast of cold wind. The worms could not withstand her power and were frozen in place. Sona called out to Roy, and another dragon's roar echoed in response. Roy mounted a dark blue dragon armed with crimson weaponry, soaring above Sona. The dragon, like a missile, dove toward the frozen worms, crashing into them with tremendous force. The impact shattered the ice, scattering the remains of the worms across the battlefield. Sona smiled with satisfaction, recognizing her son's strength as he took to the skies once more. Meanwhile, Seekvaira engaged in a fierce battle against flying worms, swiftly dispatching them with her katana, which incinerated them with each strike, showcasing her skill and determination. It surprised everyone who knew her, especially Razor, as he was aware that Seekvaira was not a user of the fire element. To master such an element with great precision and power was remarkable, especially since it prevented the worms from regenerating, leading them to fall under the blonde's weapon. However, Seekvaira noticed that her armor was beginning to fail. "Not now!" Seekvaira exclaimed, quickly analyzing her armor and realizing that she had expended too much energy during the battle. Just then, she spotted more flying worms approaching her, and she felt a sense of helplessness. "Mother!" a feminine voice called out, and Seekvaira turned to see her daughter. "Sia!" she shouted, seeing her daughter riding her dragon, Belito, flying in to rescue her. "Let's go, Vadriana!" Sia commanded, and the armed dragon soared toward the worms, taking them down as Sia swung her sword, while the dragon crushed them with its jaws and tore them apart with its claws. It didn't take long for Sia Agars to eliminate all the worms threatening her mother. Once finished, she grabbed Seekvaira's arm and mounted the dragon alongside her. "Thank you, daughter," Seekvaira said, to which Sia replied with a smile. "It's only natural for a daughter to worry about her mother. If anything happened to you, neither I nor Issei would forgive ourselves." Meanwhile, Zenobia was engaged in battle against stronger worms, wielding X Durandal and wearing Drake's armor. "Wow, they are quite strong," she exclaimed as she decapitated a worm. "Watch out, partner," Drake warned as a two-headed worm launched a substance toward Zenobia, hitting her arm. "This is corrosive," Zenobia shouted, realizing the substance was like acid. "Is this holy light?" "I just analyzed your opponents," Drake explained. "These creatures produce a light similar to that of angels, capable of easily killing demons. You must be very careful." "Understood," Zenobia replied. "Let's increase our power." "Ready, Drake?" "No need to ask," the red dragon responded. "Boost X30. Zenobia gathered energy in her boosted gear and immediately transferred it to X Durandal, which gained a reddish glow. "Ah!" she cried out as she launched herself at a large worm, delivering multiple cuts to her enemies. Limbs and amorphous parts of the worms fell to the ground as they roared in pain. The worms attempted to strike her, but she skillfully dodged their claws and bites. "Filthy creatures, perish!" Zenobia shouted as she decapitated another invader. She was panting from exhaustion when a worm charged at Razor, causing concern among the group. Almost everyone except the Gremory, who were hoping to see Zenobia fall due to her past with Issei, watched in alarm. "Watch out, Zenobia!" Miss LaBelle shouted as the massive worm barreled toward her, but then a voice called out. "Remulus!" a boy shouted, and a silver-armed dragon charged at the worm. The dragon and the worm engaged in a fierce struggle, with the dragon pinning the creature down and biting it while the worm clumsily tried to escape. "You'll pay for messing with my mother, disgusting alien," the knight riding the dragon, Remulus, yelled as he leaped forward, wielding a sword. With a swift motion, he struck down, and the worm let out a final roar before collapsing. "Thank you, Zenobia said as she deactivated her balance breaker. Her son smiled at her while pulling his sword from the fallen alien. "And of course, thank you, Remulus," she added, petting her son's dragon, which enjoyed the affection. All the survivors watched as Issei Haidu and his companions defeated the bloodthirsty alien invaders in less than 20 minutes. Tears began to flow among the humans and certain supernatural beings. Finally, a victory, a human soldier said. Thank you, a surviving student added. Yuwu, everyone cheered with joy at the defeat of the dangerous worms. The Phoenix clan smiled with satisfaction at seeing their friends again after 10 years of absence. You've become quite strong, Issei Haidu, Razor remarked, while Yubaluna affectionately hugged the blonde's arm. Milica's has grown very strong, Carlemine noted, looking at Graphia's son. I think he might even be stronger than his troublesome father, Yubaluna said seriously. However, the Phoenix and Bale families noticed some unwelcome individuals approaching the warriors who had given hope to the world. Issei, Rias called out, spotting the crimson-haired boy. He looked at the Gremory heir with indifference. My Issei has returned, she said, tears of joy in her eyes. Issei continued to gaze at his former harem, who looked at him eagerly. Issei, it's so good to have you back, Asia said. Oh my, these 10 years have treated you well, Aquino remarked, liking her lips. Seekvaira felt a wave of nausea at the sight. My childhood friend. At last, we will be together, Irina said happily. Zenobia, still in her balance breaker, moved closer to Issei upon hearing her former companion's words. You've come. Finally, we can have kittens, Kuroka and Kaneko exclaimed excitedly, while Sona Citri positioned herself protectively beside Issei. Issei-sama. Lu Fei said shyly and happily. Kiba and Gasper also expressed their joy at seeing him again, but Emilia could no longer contain herself. Stepping in front of Issei, she shouted, Enough with the hypocrisy! What do you want, dishonorable leeches? Upon hearing her ex-sister's words, Rias's expression turned furious. Get away! He is our man, Emilia Gremory, she yelled, unleashing her aura of destruction, which did not intimidate her ex-sister. Emilia simply smiled as she heard familiar voices. Father! Mother! Roy, Xia, Pavlova, and Zen shouted, accompanied by their little dragons, leaving the Gremory stunned as Roy rushed to embrace Sona. Zen stood beside Zenobia, Xia joined Seekvaira, and Pavlova positioned herself next to Emilia. Mother, who are they? Pavlova asked, looking curiously at the Gremory, Kuroka, Penemu, and Lu Fei. Simply put, they are the women who harmed your father in the past. Emilia expressed her disdain for Rias Gremory, noting the unsettling gaze of Rias's children, which stirred anxiety among the Gremory. It pained them to realize that Issei had children with women they despised. This was just the beginning of Rias Gremory's torment and her entourage. In the dual terminal leaders' lounge, 5 leaders were discussing recent events in the old world. Gantala, the leader of the ice barrier, stated seriously that the worms had returned. Noelia, deep in thought, noted that it had taken nearly 3 millennia for another horde of those abominations to arrive again. Gem Knight Crystal pointed out that unlike the last time they faced those creatures, the current society in their former world was far too weak to confront them. Flamville Eurychizes added that they had barely managed to hold their ground against such savage and difficult-to-kill beings. Souza interjected, mentioning that the creatures seemed stronger this time. He believed that only the dragon god, Great Red, and the Hindu god, Shiva, could stand against them. However, Crystal expressed doubt that those two could exterminate the invaders alone. Noelia smiled, stating that they had sent Issei and the others, who had been training hard to surpass their limits, unlike the demons, fallen angels, and angels. Souza laughed, noting that since Issei had children, his wives had been training relentlessly in both magic and physical prowess. Eurychizes was confused, asking why Souza was laughing. Souza explained that those women wanted to prove themselves worthy of the reincarnation of Shurit. Gantala smiled, recalling that the Citri clan, excluding Sona, who was now Issei's wife, and Saji and Momo, who were also married, had seen the other girls from the entourage marry members of Crystal's clan. Crystal reminisced about the 2 days of continuous celebration for the weddings, stating that his clan had never celebrated so much for a single event. Eurychizes laughed, recalling the chaos when the 4 Citri girls became PRNT. Crystal chuckled, recalling how Tsubasa, Bennia, Tomo, and especially Tsubaki were treated like queens by all the Gem Knights, both male and female. He sighed, noting that such happiness hadn't been felt in his clan since their victory against the Vylon. Gantala then asked Crystal if he had informed the 2 women that Issei had gone to the old world. Crystal, trembling with fear, admitted he had not. The other leaders exchanged worried glances. Urikizas initiated a countdown, and when they reached 0, the council door burst open, revealing someone who had been thrown through it. Crystal was horrified to see one of the most powerful dual terminal leaders had been beaten. 2 distorted female voices called out to Crystal, revealing 2 silhouettes emanating a dark aura. Crystal, feeling immense fear, greeted Lapis Lazuli and Lady Diamond nervously as they approached him with determined strides. Lapis Lazuli demanded to know why their beloved had left without telling them, while Lady Diamond insisted they be transported to the old world, fearing for Issei's safety. Crystal tried to calm them, but the pressure they exerted intimidated the male leaders. Lapis Lazuli insisted on being transported, warning Crystal that he would soon understand the meaning of pain if he did not comply. Just then, Noelia opened a portal, explaining the rules to the 2 Gem Knights. They had to change from their Gem Knight forms to human forms, and the magical circles would transport them to the underworld of the old world, where they could locate Issei's energy. The 2 Gem Knights, with childlike voices, thanked Noelia and transformed into their human forms before stepping into the portal, which closed instantly. Noelia reminded Crystal that he owed her a favor as he fainted from fear. In the old world, in the city of Kuo, after the battle where the worms suffered their first defeat, the dual terminals representatives confronted the Gremory, who were shocked to learn that the young dragon riders were Issei's children, born of the women they loathed. Rias, filled with a mix of anger, sadness, and resentment, demanded to know how Issei could have children. Aquino furiously reminded Issei that he was their promised one and that it was his duty to provide them with descendants. Ravel shouted for Issei to remember his promise to her mother, while Issei sighed heavily, rolling his eyes. Emilia expressed her exasperation, questioning if they truly believed Issei would forgive them after they had replaced him with Jean. Irina insisted that he would forgive them, claiming that he loved them. Zenobia sarcastically remarked on Irina's credibility, pointing out that she didn't even have wings. The presence of Issei and his wives elicited laughter from the group at Zenovia's comment, which struck Irina hard. Rias, pointing at Zenobia, ordered her to return to her entourage, insisting that the Seekvaira should never have left the Gremory clan and that with her, the clan would rise again. However, Rias was suddenly struck in the shoulder by an attack, sending her to the ground, revealing that Zenobia had retaliated with a dragon shoot, glaring at the red-haired Gremory. Zenobia expressed her anger, stating that she would not take orders from a spoiled girl, especially not in front of her beloved son and husband. Seekvaira crossed her arms and remarked that it was evident Rias had not matured over the past 10 years. She may have grown physically, but her mentality had not changed at all. Emilia, with a hint of disgust, commented on how Zeoticus had spoiled Rias so much that maturity would never reach her mind. Aquino, filled with rage, began to unleash her lightning in preparation to attack. However, a commanding voice interrupted, accompanied by a magical circle bearing the emblem of Astaroth. Ajuka Beelzebub appeared, flanked by Sona and her parents, warning Aquino that it would be best not to attack their heroes who had granted them their first victory against the worms. Aquino, huffing in annoyance, reluctantly complied with the green-haired man's order. Issei smiled as he greeted Ajuka, expressing how good it was to see him again. Ajuka returned the sentiment warmly. Sona's mother, Hemlock Citri, embraced her daughter, who then turned to her father for a similar embrace, expressing her joy at seeing them both. Andrew Citri, noticing Roy, inquired about him, prompting Sona to call her son over. Roy approached with a smile, introducing himself to his grandparents with a respectful bow. The patriarch of the Citri family joyfully declared that they were now grandparents, tears of happiness streaming down his face, while the matriarch shared in the emotional moment. Everyone was delighted by the news, well, almost everyone. Rias, filled with anger and tears of sadness, watched her former friend smile radiantly with her son, vowing to make her pay for stealing her dream with Issei. Meanwhile, Kiba, a knight of Gremory, spotted someone he had been waiting for, and his face lit up with a smile as he called out to Tsubaki, the queen of Sona Citri. She met his gaze with her usual cold expression. As Kiba rushed toward her, a red-haired man approached Tsubaki, cradling a baby in blankets, announcing that the little one, Garnet, wanted to spend some time with her. Tsubaki smiled warmly at her husband, giving him a kiss before taking the baby in her arms and beginning to coo at him, leaving Kiba in disbelief. Kiba's heart sank as he processed the scene before him, realizing that Tsubaki was with someone else. He called out to her, demanding to know what was happening. Tsubaki feigned surprise, greeting him with indifference. Kiba, furious, repeated his question, but the red-haired man stepped forward, confronting Kiba and questioning who he thought he was to shout at his wife. Kiba's anger flared as he declared that Tsubaki was his girlfriend, unaware of the tension building around them. The red-haired man coldly reminded Kiba that Tsubaki had moved on after he and his selfish guardian had replaced Issei and betrayed their friendship. Kiba insisted it had been a mistake, claiming that Issei would forgive him because he was his best friend. Issei, however, interjected, stating that Kiba was no longer his friend, causing Kiba to shed tears in despair. Rias, furious, shouted at Issei for hurting Yuto. Emilia countered, telling Rias to be quiet and reminding her that because of her poor decisions 10 years ago, they had all lost everything. The Gremory family and Rias's allies lowered their heads in resignation, but Kiba refused to accept defeat. He invoked his sacred gear, challenging the red-haired man for Tsubaki's sake. The onlookers were stunned by Kiba's declaration. Issei glared at Kiba, furious at how he viewed Tsubaki. Zen Quarta condemned Kiba, expressing his disapproval. The atmosphere grew tense as Kiba's gaze turned to Tsubaki, who looked worried. The red-haired man assured her not to worry, declaring that he would not allow Kiba to harm either her or their child. He then requested a duel against Kiba in the underworld, and Ajuka, recognizing the situation, granted the request, commanding all supernatural beings to the territory of Agrias for the battle. In the arena of the raiding games, the stands were filling up with spectators eager to witness the match between the disgraced knight Kiba Yuto and Tsubaki's husband. The leaders of the alliance, along with Issei's family, the dual terminal girls, and the Citri clan watched intently from the VIP section, while Rias and her allies occupied the opposite stands. The calm red-haired man stood ready in the arena, while Kiba paced anxiously, eager to begin the fight. Sona, noticing Serafal's absence, asked her father where she was. He explained that she was currently in the family hospital undergoing physical therapy to prevent her muscles from atrophying. Sona's mother added that losing the use of her legs and hips had made Serafal reconsider her past actions, as she had lost many things, including her position as Mao, which she had fought hard to achieve, along with her show and reputation. Sona and her entourage felt a twinge of sympathy for Serafal. A magical circle appeared, displaying the emblem of Baal, revealing two young women, one with chestnut hair and the other with platinum locks, holding hands and accompanied by two little girls in their arms. The chestnut-haired woman, smiling brightly, explained that they had encountered a delay at the Baal castle. The platinum-haired woman added cheerfully that Serorg had been playing with his new cousins. Ajuka recognized the women, finding them familiar, but was taken aback. Reese Gusto, accompanied by a child, exclaimed their names with excitement. The leaders of the alliance were shocked to see the rejuvenated women. Venelana smiled and teased them with a surprise, while Grafia offered a nervous smile. Grafia's thoughts wandered to Yasaka's rejuvenation, but her musings were interrupted by the referee announcing the start of the match between Kiba Yuto and the young redhead. The redhead introduced himself as Ruby Shinra, emphasizing his last name, which irritated Kiba. In the stands with the Gremory family, Rias cheered for Kiba, while Kaneko encouraged him, shouting that he could do it. Amidst the cheers from his teammates, Kiba raised his hand in acknowledgement, signaling that he had heard their support. The VIP room was filled with shocked silence as the culmination of the battle unfolded. The children, still unfamiliar with such confrontations, were escorted out of the stadium by Rainier, Perry, Venelana, Grafia, and Gabriel. Meanwhile, Rias watched in horror as her knight was struck down. Rias cried out in despair upon seeing Kiba pierced through the chest by Ruby's lance. Aquino, Asia, and Kaneko shed tears for their fallen comrade, unable to comprehend the gravity of the situation. Kiba felt an immense pain in his heart and ribs, sensing his consciousness slipping away. His vision blurred as he whispered Tsubaki's name, his grip on his sacred sword weakening until it clattered to the ground. Ruby pulled the lance from Kiba's chest, declaring the consequences of his recklessness and immaturity. Ria screamed again as she witnessed Kiba's head roll away from his body, which fell to the ground in a final spasm. Kiba's face remained etched with suffering, his eyes still searching for Shinra Tsubaki, who turned away in disdain. A final tear escaped his lifeless eyes as Kiba Yudo met his end. The atmosphere in the arena was heavy with silence. Shinra Tsubaki's husband, the gem knight Ruby, had slain Rias Gremory's knight in a dishonorable manner. Rias, feeling powerless, watched as her first knight fell. Kiba's body began to dissolve into particles before the tearful eyes of his former comrades, who could do nothing to save him. Gradually, the trace of Kiba Yudo vanished, leaving only his evil piece behind. Suddenly, a magic circle appeared in the arena, revealing Mao Ajuka Beelzebub, who wore a serious expression. He bent down to retrieve the evil piece belonging to the red-haired knight. Ajuka addressed Rias, reminding her of a meeting they had long ago, as she felt a wave of anxiety wash over her. Flashback, 10 years ago. Sarag Castle, Lucifer, 8 p.m. 5 days had passed since Issei and his current harem had traveled to the dual terminal, and a meeting was convened to determine the punishment for Rias Gremory and those involved in the conspiracy against Issei Hayudo. The leaders of the alliance awaited the arrival of a clan they were not eager to see. Odin, accompanied by Gondel, the grandmother of Rosweiss, questioned whether they would show up. Ajuka responded that they had no choice, as they understood the consequences of their absence. Roygun Leviathan expressed doubt that they would dare challenge their authority. Just then, a reddish magic circle appeared, revealing Rias Gremory's clan and her allies who had participated in the attack. They all wore defeated expressions. Rias greeted the leaders with a tone of resignation. Ajuka stood up, addressing the assembly. He explained that the meeting was convened to determine their punishment for attempting to kill the pillar of their alliance, the one who had supported them all, without whom their existence would have been threatened by the Cows Brigade. The Nikomata Magari was the first to speak, imposing exile on Rias and her allies, particularly targeting Kuroka Hellcat and Chiron Hellcat. She warned them that if they set foot in Kyoto, she would personally deal with them. Kuroka protested, but Magari swiftly slapped her, knocking her to the ground in front of everyone, especially a shocked Kaneko. Magari scorned Kuroka, claiming her mother would be ashamed of her and her sister for abandoning a great guy for a pretty face. Kaneko, filled with indignation, tried to defend her sister, but Magari silenced her with another slap, causing Kaneko to cry as she touched her bruised cheek. Magari expressed her disappointment, stating that the daughters of her friend had turned out to be nothing but selfish and unworthy. Both Nikomatas wept at Magari's harsh words, still unable to accept their wrongdoing and viewing the punishment as unjust. Odin and Gondel then confronted Rosweiss, who was facing two significant figures in her life. Odin, as the leader of Asgard, imposed eternal exile on Rosweiss, denying her access to Valhalla, Asgard, or even Hela, who wished to see her in Helheim, stripped of honor for her heinous act against Rias. Rosweiss felt crushed by Odin's words, especially in front of her grandmother, who looked at her with disappointment. Tears streamed down her face as she acknowledged her fate. Gondel remarked that at least her other granddaughter, Perry, would do what Rosweiss could not, for following that demon-dressed girl. Rias, furious, demanded respect from the indifferent alliance, insisting that they had lost the right to judge her after their actions a year ago. Aquino, filled with despair, admitted their mistake regarding Issei, but pleaded that they did not deserve such treatment from the others. Barakiel held back his disdain for his daughter as he expressed his disappointment. He told her that she had dishonored her mother's memory with her foolish decision. He questioned whether Issei had not been enough for her. Akino spoke softly, urging him to be quiet. Barakiel, now furious, shouted that she was no longer the sweet daughter he once had, the product of his love for Shuri. He accused her of being a disgrace and a gold digger. Akino, overwhelmed with emotion, shouted for him to stop and lunged at her father, but he caught her wrist, preventing her from attacking. In a swift motion, Barakiel slapped Akino, causing her to fall to the ground, clutching her cheek in shock and disbelief. He declared that she was now banished from Grigori, renouncing all blood ties with her. He pointed at Irina, who was horrified by the way Barakiel spoke to his daughter, and warned her that she was also unwelcome in Grigori. He threatened to destroy her if he ever saw her in any Grigori facility. Meanwhile, the four Maos confronted Rias, who felt intimidated. They informed her that, due to her demotion to a low-class demon, her clan had fallen to the lowest status, and she would face further punishment. Ajuka announced that she would no longer have the right to reincarnate anyone in her retinue. He unleashed a green magical sphere that struck Rias and her remaining followers, leaving her in shock. He warned her to take good care of her remaining servants, as her evil pieces would alert him if one of them perished, and he would come to destroy it. Unable to bear the humiliation any longer, Rias decided to retreat with her pieces to the abandoned mansion of her clan. Her allies experienced the rejection of the supernatural society, to the point where even the elders of the Demon Council did not consider them for future commitments due to their past actions against Issei Hayudo. Rias continued to weep over the loss of the only thing that connected her to her beloved knight, who had been slain. Ajuka merely brushed off the ashes of the destroyed evil piece. Rias lamented that her knight had no right to kill Kiba. A voice questioned her, pointing out the hypocrisy of her statement. Rias grimaced in disgust as she saw her sister Emilia approaching with Agarz's retinue and personalities from the dual terminal. Rias told her to be quiet and moved closer, ready to strike, but Emilia showed no fear and confronted her sister. She argued that Tsubaki had been Yudo's girlfriend and had a duty to forgive him, just as she believed Issei would forgive her, and they would be happy together. Seekvaira, holding back her anger, challenged Rias's belief that Issei would easily forgive them after they had tried to kill him, extract his sacred gear, and replace him with a demon of lesser power. Rias shouted that Issei owed her his life, that he was her pawn and owed her loyalty. She insisted that if it weren't for Rainier, he would be dead, and ordered him to abandon those who were pulling him away from her. Suddenly, Rias received a blow to her abdomen, leaving her on her knees. Pavlova, Issei's daughter, warned Rias not to speak about her family in such a way, especially regarding her father. Rias cursed her niece, calling her a disgrace to the Gremmery name. Pavlova shouted for her to be quiet and delivered a punch that knocked Rias to the ground, rendering her unconscious. Rias's allies cried out in shock at their leader's defeat. Milikas, observing Rias on the ground, remarked on her weakness and questioned what was expected from the weakest branch of their family. Akino, furious, confronted Milikas for his disrespect towards Rias and the memory of Surzex. However, a cold look from Milikas silenced her, as he radiated an aura that made her uneasy. Issei placed a hand on Milikas's shoulder, offering support and reminding Akino that she was the least qualified to speak after her outburst against Barakiel. Akino fell to her knees, overwhelmed by the mention of Issei as the true love of her life. She questioned him, her eyes empty, as she wondered how he knew such things. Issei raised an eyebrow, explaining that he was not a fortune-teller but had learned about the threats from the worms. He pointed out that in an alliance, mutual support was essential, something the former leaders had forgotten. The Gremmery and their allies began to realize how Issei spoke of those important to them. Kaneko knelt, pleading with Issei not to be cruel. Kuroka, with smeared makeup from her tears, begged for forgiveness. Irina, echoing Kaneko's plea, asked for a second chance. However, Issei was losing his patience, and his icy aura began to affect the three girls. In a sudden move, Issei slapped Irina, knocking her to the ground. She was left in shock, unable to comprehend that the person she loved had struck her. Issei unleashed a wave of power, sending both Nicomedes crashing into a wall. He glared at Irina, anger evident in his eyes, as she felt a knot form in her throat from his fierce gaze. He declared that he needed to burn the clothes that had been touched by those he despised. The others nodded in agreement. Ajuka observed the scene, noting how the Gremory family was in tears, especially Asia and Ravel, who were trying to heal Rias, who remained unconscious. He suggested that they could rebuild her old home for her to inhabit in this world. The group from Agars and the Dual Terminal expressed their gratitude, acknowledging that it was the least they could do for their first victory against the worms. Roygun, calm and composed, assured them that they would notify them of any extraordinary developments and encouraged them to rest. She mentioned that Yasaka, Valerie, and Elmenahild were already living in the new residence with Kunu, having returned from their trip to Kyoto and Transylvania sooner than expected. As the group from Agars departed in a magical circle, the Gremory family remained behind, determined not to give up on Issei. New Hyudo residence. Upon arriving at the new home, many passers-by recognized Issei and the girls, along with their little ones, as the heroes who had halted the bloody advance of the worms. Grateful humans approached them, especially teenagers from Kuo Academy, women, children, and the elderly, expressing their thanks for the magnificent effort that had saved lives from the invaders. After the encounter, they quickly entered the house, feeling a bit drained from the overwhelming gratitude. A voice remarked on their newfound fame, revealing a young blonde kitsune with an enchanting figure and delicate appearance. Another blonde kitsune, embodying a warrior's spirit and determination, stood beside her. A small kitsune, holding the first kitsune's hand, called out to them. Issei inquired about Yasaka and Kunu's meeting, relieved to see both his wife and daughter. Yasaka approached him with a smile, expressing her happiness and sharing that Magari had done an excellent job as a leader, allowing her to feel at ease about her faction. Elmenahild, however, spoke sadly about her clan, Carmilla, which had been extinguished. She lamented the loss of her family, who had not survived the attack. Valerie Teeps comforted her friend with a warm embrace, assuring her that the sacrifices of her clan would not be in vain. Issei joined in the embrace, promising that they would put an end to the creatures responsible for the devastation. Emilia, with a serious yet encouraging smile, affirmed that they had returned to this world for a reason. Winda, accompanied by a boy resembling Issei, declared that it was time to resolve the issue that had persisted for millennia. The entire Agars clan, along with the Citri and the Gem Knights, stood united in agreement with Winda's statement. The arrival of the extraterrestrial invaders posed a threat that could potentially repeat the events of the past, but this time, humanity was vulnerable. They were determined to fight for the sake of humanity, the supernatural, and the innocent lives at stake, ready to give everything for them. To be continued. Kiba Yudo faced off against Ruby Shinra, the referee shouting for them to get ready. Both contenders nodded, and the match began. Yudo summoned a sacred demonic sword, declaring that it was time to reclaim what belonged to him. Ruby, meanwhile, conjured a lance with a curved blade, its reddish hue reminiscent of the gemstone that inspired his name. He stated firmly that he would not allow Yuto to harm his wife or his son, Garnet. As Kiba charged at Ruby, the clash of their weapons commenced. Kiba showcased his skill and speed, while Ruby effortlessly defended himself. However, as the battle progressed, their speed increased to a point where their movements became nearly invisible, the sound of metal colliding echoing through the arena. In the VIP room, the leaders and the Hyudo family observed the intense confrontation. Michael noted that both fighters seemed evenly matched. Issei disagreed, pointing out that while they were equal in speed, Kiba was struggling to keep up. Calm Gusto added that Ruby was just warming up and had yet to reveal his true form or power. Winda remarked that Ruby was practically toying with Kiba. Back in the arena, Kiba was panting and frustrated, unable to land a single blow. He shouted in disbelief at his inability to hit Ruby. Ruby, visibly annoyed, explained that Kiba's rage and hatred made his movements predictable. He suggested that if Kiba fought against Issei's children, they would easily surpass him. Kiba felt deeply insulted by Ruby's words, especially coming from the man who had taken his wife and his friend. Clenching his teeth, he allowed his anger to fuel his grip on the sacred demonic sword. He declared that he would not accept defeat and would prove himself worthy of being Tsubaki Shinra's husband, vowing to defeat Ruby. Ruby, unfazed, countered Kiba's aggression with a swift maneuver of his lance, striking Kiba in the abdomen and forcing him to his knees, gasping for breath. Ruby told him to accept that he was the past Tsubaki wanted to forget and to leave with the consequences of his choices. Kiba, refusing to back down, shouted that he would not accept this outcome and would kill Ruby and the child he had with his wife. Ruby paused, and a fierce red aura enveloped him, signaling a transformation. He warned Kiba that he had just sealed his fate. As the aura intensified, Kiba's opponent began to change form, becoming more powerful and intimidating. Ruby instructed everyone to cover the eyes and ears of the children, not wanting them to witness what was about to unfold. He declared that Kiba should never have crossed paths with his wife. With that, Ruby launched himself into the attack. The sounds of slashing and clashing filled the air as he struck Kiba with ferocity. Kiba was gravely injured, and with each attack, Ruby's lance ignited in flames. The Gremory family watched in horror as their comrade was overwhelmed by Ruby's relentless assault. Kiba's desperate cries for mercy echoed through the arena, but Ruby continued his onslaught, determined to put an end to the conflict.